Yeah. Welcome in. It's the Saturday edition of the Deeper Dive as we lead you up to a 7:30 Eastern lock. Don't worry, live before lock coming your way an hour from now. Myself and Steve in the house, Mike Awesemo producing, and we're going to get you ready for this gigantic 7-game slate. A lot of value, a lot of mind opportunity below, deeper in that slate that Steve already has some eyes on. So we're going to look at everything across the board, all of the main sites, everything that we have on Awesemo as far as projections are concerned. Hit that thumbs up button. And of course, make sure you're subscribed here, not just the DFS channel, but we have 3. We have the odds and the fantasy football channel. Steve, my friend, pleasure to be back with you. Can't wait to break into this slate here with you, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Pumped up to get back at it. Took the last few days off for the holidays. So really looking forward to getting back into the swing of things. I think we got a nice fun slate here to do so and give us all a chance to, maybe earn some money to pay for some of those Black Friday deals that we were all after last few days.
I was going to say, did you take off from NBA or just as a whole to cover everything Black Friday and holiday shopping? Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, just mostly NBA. I did play some of the NFL Thanksgiving slates. Those did not go as well as I was hoping, but that's all right. Yeah, we're ready to. I think we should be in good shape. Also, having some extra money here for the NFL weekend is always a fun thing too. So yeah, I think this is fun. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely, man. That's always the thing too. Is coming off of that Thanksgiving break there. Thursday, Friday, there's so much food, leftovers, everything. Before you know it, you're passed out for 15 hours and you miss slates and you miss lineups. So it's a good thing to be back focused on this Saturday as we hit this slate. Now, overall, when you look at this ahead of time, before we start diving in game by game, and we'll bypass that Sixers-Wolves game, of course, once things really tip off at 7:30, is there anything that jumped out at you from an injury standpoint, from a strategy standpoint, or maybe from a game or two that you want to target specifically?
I think this is a little bit more healthy slate, at least with the questionable players at this time. There are some guys that have already been ruled out that I think will shape some of our plays throughout the next couple hours that we talk about. But yeah, I don't know that there is quite as many late swapping issues that we have to worry about, which is nice. And I'm also thinking that we may not have, there could be, I guess, a few small lineup questions that, we're looking to see what happens. But I think for the most part, we kind of have a pretty good idea of how things are going to look. So I think that in and of itself is a little bit different from how we've been the last couple of Saturdays. So I'm looking forward to that because I don't really, I love doing some of the late swap, but I won't mind, focusing some of this afternoon and this evening on some NFL stuff. So I think there's a good thing there.
Cruise control is what I'm hearing more so than not.
I'm hoping.
That's never always a good thing, man. If we can find a way to just have hands off and just let lineups work for us, then we're in a good spot by all means. A couple of things we will pay attention to game by game from an injury standpoint as well. But let's jump in on this. And again, any questions you have here for Steve, make sure you hit that thumbs up button first and foremost, and you are subscribed. People coming in here by the drove. So we appreciate everybody hanging post Thanksgiving. Hopefully you're watching with whatever your leftovers of choice may be, the mash, the sweet, whatever it is. So yes, smash like the mash. Good job. Let's look at the Knicks and the Hawks game first and just crunching lineups and looking at our projections ahead of time. Even our ownership has it for DK. Emmanuel Quickley is going to pop up a ton for the Knicks across the board. He is the 5th highest owned player we have projected on DraftKings. So normally we start at the top, but when somebody on a squad is so heavily owned and people on the field are getting to him so much, I am curious how you look at Quickley and then the rest of the Knicks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Quickley makes one of the better deals across the board in the industry. We don't have a lot of good cost savings today, so he really kind of stands out as a good value. Be the Kemba's first game missing and Rose missing his third straight, so they're really pretty shorthanded, and you got to assume that they're going to give Quickley some fairly good minutes here. He's not had quite the second year breakout that a lot of people were hoping for him, but he also just hasn't had the minutes. So we're projecting him at about 30 minutes, which would be a high for the season by a decent amount. He has had some 30-minute games last year, so he definitely can play that many minutes. He's a young guy, and in the guard position, you can certainly get up there. So I think that's fine. When he normally has played those minutes, he has synced pretty well up with the starting unit. He averaged about 30 points in those games. If he does that again today at 4,300 on DraftKings and 46 and 4,100 on FanDuel, both of those look like good prices. He is fairly popular, like you mentioned, but I think even at that popularity, I do think he stands out as a pretty good play and someone that we can get some good cost savings on. I'm not sure why, but Yahoo doesn't have this game on their slate,
Yeah.
so you can't get him over there, which also kind of is a fun way to be able to mix up your players across the different slates. So overall, yeah, I think Quickley is someone that I'm going to go back to, and like I did a lot of times last year, and I think that his extra minutes and his productivity with this unit should be a good one.
What about Fournier? I mean, 4,700 on DK, significantly less owned than Quickley at about 16.7%. But you mentioned the voids left by guys not there. Already in heavy rotation is Fournier. I'm surprised people aren't getting to him more than Quickley. It's only a $400 break on DK between the two.
Yeah, I think Fournier also makes a lot of sense. We're projecting him to get 33 minutes, so a few more than Quickley. Just Quickley is a little bit more productive in those minutes, so I think that's why he's kind of coming out slightly better. We actually do have Quickley projecting at a slightly higher boom percentage rate, 40% versus Fournier's at 24%, but both of them look like they're very good plays compared to what the field is going after them on. And I'm not sure why the field isn't on either of them that much. I mean, normally when you have that much opportunity available, those are the type of people that people are going to go to. So I think maybe the thing that's held off folks on Fournier a little bit is just he hasn't really been having a very solid November. He's only top 20 points twice in his last 8 games. So I think that's just making people hold off a little bit. But this is the game, without Kemba and without Rose, he should see some additional looks, some additional playing time. It's a pretty good combination for him to have a bounce back.
Yeah. Anybody else you want to look at with the absence of a couple of guys? No, Alec Burks right now, 4,900. Saw the chat giving him some love earlier as well. So we're looking at guys kind of in that 4K range that we can take advantage of. If the Knicks are getting beat up by the Hawks, there's always garbage time / blowout time that you can factor in there as well. Yeah. We also have, yeah, right. Exactly. Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think Burks is a really good spot. The thing I guess with Burks and with Barrett, both of them should get some additional looks. Without Kemba and without Rose, they should get a little bit more playing time as well. And for whatever reason, though, it just looks like the public is on those guys just as much or more so than the cheaper Quickley and Fournier. So that's probably the thing that maybe worries me the most of anything. But I do think that you can take a little bit of a splash here and there with those guys if you're building a couple lineups. They're nowhere near the same play as the other guys. If we go all the way up to the top, though, I think Randle is pretty interesting. There is no real standout player that is at the very top of the pricing range, to pay all the way up for this game or this whole slate. So right. I think Randle, he's pretty much going to be the same as I'm saying for almost all these guys. If you want to pay up and get them, I think it's worth it. And you just are going to have to maybe mix and match if you're making 3 lineups, choose 3 different guys and kind of go after it. On And Randle is kind of interesting across the different sites differently because he's priced way up on DraftKings at 10,200. He's priced way down on FanDuel at 8,700, but he's low owned on DraftKings, a bit higher owned on FanDuel. I think all those kind of cancel out together to where I like him, decently. Where he should be probably somewhere between 10 to 20% of your lineups on both sites. So I think that was kind of interesting as I was kind of building up some lineups together with him.
All right, let's flip to the Hawks. We should mention, by the way, Quickley is right there at the top on FanDuel on our Boom Bust tool. So all of these tools available to you on Awesemo that you can be using and following along with Steve as we break down this slate. I mean, he's right up there at the top. I was looking to see where Randle was as you were breaking down and he's not terrible at a 17% clip. He's definitely probably the bottom of that top tier, but Quickley up there at the top by a mile at 35%. Now let's flip on the other side here. Of course, on the top of DraftKings as well, once you get past Nas in that early game. So let's look at the other side of it. And here I think we can start at the top because Trae Young at 9,600 on DK, a lot of people getting to him, 16.6% ownership right now on the field. Do you find yourself a little heavy or maybe light to that number?
Yeah, he's kind of in the same situation where I think you can go and pay up to get Young for sure. The problem with him is he's both expensive and he's, like you say, he's pretty popular as well. So he's probably one of my less favorite plays from the pay up options. But because there are no standout ones that I'm really going heavily after, I think that he looks pretty much to be just as good as them, or maybe a little bit less so.
All right. So where is there an opportunity to jump in? Looking at ownership compared to cost, Collins may not be that big of a break here because we're also getting some double-digit ownership there on the field, 6,900, somewhat of a pivot at that 4-5 or individually in that spot. Is that a place we can start with Collins, or are you looking at maybe somebody a little bit lower to take advantage of, or maybe start with Capella where he's not as heavily owned? And if you are paying up at 7,500 as a pivot on that spot, you may be able to have some more maneuverability with Capella as opposed to Collins.
Yeah, I think both Capella and Collins both are fine. They're guys that their price tag is about right. Overall, I guess part of it will depend on what comes from injury news. Right now, kind of expecting that Bogdanovic and Reddish both play, but they are questionable as far as I know. And it's a 7:30 game, so we'll know that one by lock since we do have the delayed 7:30 lock. But overall, I think if you get both of those guys in, it just kind of neither of them are going to help Capella or Collins a whole lot, but it would give a little bit of additional usage to both of those guys as well as Trae Young if both of those guys were to miss. If Bogdanovic were to miss, you might see some additional minutes from Herter or Gallinari as well. Problem just being that they also have other guys on the bench like Lou Williams, DeLone Wright, TLC that all could soak up a fair amount of minutes if we get either of those two guys to miss. So Atlanta is a fairly deep team, and they don't like to play the starters super deep into the game. So I think for the most part, I think this is a game where the pricing is about right, and the players might be a little bit too popular even for their current roles.
Yeah, before we hit that next game, that Nets Suns game, you mentioned Herter. He's at 4,500 on DK, 6.5% projected ownership. But your point about depth and just movement around with bodies on that team, it doesn't even look like the risk on a cost-cutting move for Herter, knowing that you have ownership in your favor, is even worth it.
Yeah, I think that's what it kind of feels like to me. Maybe if you get those extra minutes and that rotation mixed up and the news comes out late enough that we don't get any ownership changes, it might be a fine place to go. But yeah, I think for the most part, there's 7 games and lots of other places that we can go otherwise.
All right, well, let's do that. Let's move on here. We'll hit that Suns-Nets game in Brooklyn. You out there, hit that thumbs up button, please. We don't ask much. Steve is here making you some money. I have a lot of people. That number keeps bumping up as far as eyes on the set. So all we ask is you hit that thumbs up button and you're subscribed as well. It does us wonders here as we continue to build the largest DFS community on the planet here with Awesemo. All right, man, let's go get into this game. A lot of expected points. I know the total has moved up a little bit, 219, 219 and a half, up to now 224 and a half. This thing was at like 219 somewhat yesterday morning. So the expectation is points, and then some. The Suns have won like every single game, right? They're riding a 15-game winning streak right now. It's insane. Here come the Nets, by the way. They've won 4 straight as well. So let's start on the visitor side here with Phoenix and kind of how high you are on the Suns, and knowing, of course, that we're expecting a lot of points here. Some maneuverability, to say the least. We've got Paul, we've got Booker, we've got Ayton, some high-price guys, and maybe even Bridges to start there in that mid-range if you wanted to save some money.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be the game of the night from just a fun, let's go watch the game type of game. I think it's also a pretty good game from a DFS perspective. The thing that holds it from being a great game from a DFS perspective is both of the teams are fairly healthy. So even though we are projecting a pretty high scoring game, and I think it should be a fun one to watch, it isn't quite as good from a DFS perspective, just because of that. And both of the teams, because of the kind of the depth that they have at this point with that healthy rotation, it makes it a little bit harder to get to some of their more expensive options. So I can't fault you at all for going with like Booker, especially on FanDuel or Yahoo. Booker 7,700 on FanDuel and only 32 on Yahoo. Both of those prices are very attractive. He's a bit more expensive at 8,600 over on DraftKings. That's still a fine price for him because he's not very popular there. So I don't fault you ever going for that for him. He's not really been super hot lately, so it is possible that he will get even less popular on FanDuel. We do have him projected fairly high in ownership there right now, but he hasn't really had a big game lately. So I think you could see him slightly be underweight on that. And then, Chris Paul also, he's going to have a big game for them to keep up in this game against the Nets. So you might be able to see him kind of step up for a few extra minutes in a game that they'll want to win, just like they did in the playoffs and when they played him a little bit deeper and gave him some extra run. So I think both of those guys are both plays that I'm not going to go crazy on, but I do think that I'll want to probably be somewhere around the field with them. And I think that they make a good place to start off some of your lineups if you have the money.
How about a depth play with Campaign? 9% ownership right now, 3,800 on DK. You're definitely saving a ton of money. I know he was a fan favorite to work in last year. I don't know if this particular game with the script that you laid out is going to flow more towards somebody like him as opposed to a starter.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he would certainly make a lot of sense. We do have him showing with a 17% boom probability compared to a 9% ownership, and then over on FanDuel 4% versus 1%. So, I mean, he certainly is better on DraftKings from that standpoint. So I do think that he is the guy that you can definitely go to. And I think he makes a lot of sense. Well, it'll be interesting to see if they are willing to go with a little bit of extra run for Paul in this type of game. It is so early in the season that that could be a lot of narrative, but it is also possible that they're willing to just write it out with Payne for as long as they want as well. The other guy that kind of stands out a little bit to me is Mikal Bridges, especially over on FanDuel. He's only 5,100 over there. That's a price tag that I think it looks really nice. There's not a lot of small forwards that are great on this slate, and I think that's what really sticks out. It allows you to pay a reasonable price for a small forward, and I think it's one where you could see extended minutes from some of these guys. Bridges isn't the guy that I'm always excited to go after, but when there's very little small forwards that you really want to go after, I think that he makes a good place to go to.
Steve, he's $19 on Yahoo compared to Gordon Hayward at 22. You've got Levine and Butler, who are the pay-up options, 36, 45 respectively. But that reinforces your point, I think, more so than any other spot is at Yahoo to get him at $19 seems like an absolute steal.
Yeah, I think that is a good, very good spot. And we only have him showing at 8% ownership, so I like going at least double that for the compared to the field. It's just overall the Phoenix team on Yahoo is priced pretty affordably, and they're not getting a lot of love from the public either. So I think you could really stack up your team over there on Yahoo with Phoenix guys. I see some.
Yeah, go ahead.
I see a couple of people like asking about Ayton as compared to Christian Wood as a pivot play. I think Ayton makes a good play. I do think, and we'll talk about Houston in a little bit more detail, but I think Christian Wood is one of the better plays on the slate. So I don't know if he's a great direct pivot from that way, but I do think that he's a good play in and of himself. And I mean, if you can get to Ayton instead of Christian Wood, I don't know if I would just call it a pivot, but I think he makes a good play.
How much, if you're building a bunch of lineups tonight, not maybe just a handful here, but if you're building a bunch of lineups, how much are you getting to just stacking this game as a whole and trying to maneuver with both Brooklyn and Phoenix taking advantage of the higher total? And really, granted, it's not the highest total on the board. We have that Houston game, but the way in which this has been trending and moving the total, the expectation is that you're going to get somewhere possibly in the 250s tonight.
Yeah. I mean, stacking a game up isn't one of the things that I do a whole lot in NBA DFS. Certainly not as much as some of the other sports, but I do think it can be warranted at times because if you do get a game that goes to overtime, especially on a 7-game slate, I don't think it's big enough where there's all kinds of value also. So I do think it makes some sense. I probably wouldn't go like too overboard on too many guys just because the Brooklyn guys are kind of expensive. So it starts to get a little bit tricky if you're putting like Booker and Durant and Harden. You really have to find some good values elsewhere in that case. So this one might be a little bit of a tough one to stack up a ton. But if you have like good values that you really like, say like Mikal Bridges and Chris Paul potentially, or Bridges and Cameron Payne, something like that. I think that those are maybe a little bit better of a stack for this game, which will be a little bit counterintuitive because it's not the game that people are expecting also.
So let's look at the Nets here. We've got clearly Durant and Harden up there at the top. I am interested how you see LaMarcus Aldridge as a possible pivot at the center's position, especially now being inserted in the starting lineup. So we've got some obvious plays and maybe some not so obvious plays on the Nets.
Yeah, I think Aldridge is a really good price. He started the last game. He got 29 minutes, and he also got 34 minutes the game before that. Blake Griffin was a DNP coach's decision last game. That's what got him in the starting lineup. Sounds like that they're sticking with Aldridge, getting a lot of the playing time here going forward. So, I mean, he scored 34 and 38 DK points those last 2 games. We're projecting him a little bit under that right now. And even with that, he's coming up as a pretty good value. So he could be a way to go. We were talking about what some of the other center options might be. He might be kind of somewhat of a pivot off of some of those guys that we were talking about, especially and then even over on Yahoo, I think he looks really good. So across the board, across the sites, I think Aldridge looks like a good play. The one thing that we will want to keep an eye on is we talked about it a little bit last week where Drummond was really good there for a while when he first started playing bigger minutes. But then as he played bigger minutes for multiple games, he started tailing off. And I do wonder if you might see that a little bit from Aldridge. He's not the youngest guy out there on the floor. But I'm going to hope that isn't coming yet, and we get at least a few more really productive games out of him for this price tag.
All right. So outside of Harden and Durant really at the top, mentioned Aldridge. Are you looking at anybody else? Patty Mills going to get a lot of opportunity there. Brown has popped up as a cheaper option and some crunches, but I don't know how heavy to the field you would get to him. Anybody else that you would be looking at specifically? No, Joe Harris is out as well.
Yep. Yeah. With Joe Harris out, we've seen Patty Mills get big minutes actually. So his minutes have been kind of in the mid 30s. And really, I heard a lot of folks kind of worrying about how Patty Mills is going to play with Harden and Durant and some of these big name players, but he's actually performed at a quite a bit higher rate than what he normally performs on a per minute basis. So all of those kind of narratives that he wasn't going to be able to play well with those guys and why would they give the ball to Patty Mills when they have these other big name players was, a poor narrative to come with. What you've seen instead is you've seen defenses kind of falling off of Patty Mills and Patty Mills getting all these extra wide open looks and he's been knocking them down pretty well. Has it been luck that he's been hot from the shooting? Possibly, but when he gets open as much as he is, because the people are going to focus in on Harden and Durant more so than him, I think he looks like he's a pretty good spot again.
All right, man. Let's keep it moving here. And again, hit that thumbs up button, please. We appreciate all of you hanging with us on this Saturday evening. We've got Live Before Lock coming your way. 35 minutes. We're going to get through these next 5 games here with Steve and myself here. All right. So let's look at this. We have the Heat in Chicago. We'll start with Miami. Butler is going to be, we talked about that small forward spot as far as, having a pivot there with Bridges. But what about Butler on this slate here as far as being the pay up option at the small forward?
Yeah, I think Butler is a pretty good pay up option. He's not like one of the guys also that I'm going out of my way on. There's a lot of guys I think that you just kind of mix and match on the pay up range. And I think Butler kind of fits in that range. He's not someone that I'm looking to get after a lot. LaMelo is probably the guy that I'm looking to get the most after, but I don't think that anyone else stands out too much. Overall, Miami is pretty healthy, and because of that, it is keeping their ownership in check. It's keeping people not wanting to pay up for them because they're priced still pretty high because they've been missing various people, especially Bam, quite a bit lately. So I don't see a lot of great value here. But that doesn't mean, Butler, Bam, Kyle Lowry, all these guys can blow up any given time. So I do think that they're okay plays. For Bam specifically, though, one thing I would watch out for a little bit is since he's come back from his knee injury, he's only had 33, 25, 35, and 29 in his DK points since then. We're projecting him for 36.6 points. So, I think our projection is fine as long as he is getting back to 100% health. But that tells you that he has missed those, his projection each of the last 4 games since he's returned. So I think I'm going to probably take a chance on him being 100%, even though he's not really played like it so far. One of the ways you can kind of get ahead of people in DFS is a lot of people are going to see those poor performances over the last few games, and they're going to say, oh, Bam is not 100%, which he may not be. And that is a risk that you're going to take, but you could easily see him come out and score 50 and just kind of throw the slate on its head a little bit. And while that's not the most likely outcome, it is something I'm willing to do on a few of my lineups.
Hey, 4.8% ownership projected at least on DraftKings. And that's free for you today. The DFS main slate ownership projections. You can jump on and be a part of everything that we're doing here on Awesemo. It's insanely easy to be a part of this community here. And we offer everything $29.95 a week for Awesemo Plus. And that's your weekly pass. You get everything access, including NBA. And we'll give you this package here. NBA Live is the code. NBA Live, one word, all caps, 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. So you can use all of the tools available to you, the ones that we use on this very show that Steve's using on his shows and in real life. So this is all real stuff here that we're using and applying. All right, let's go a little deep. I mean, Hero, do you have anything there with Hero, or you want to just move and see if there's anything deeper with Miami, or maybe just move to the Bulls?
Yeah.
Maybe Duncan Robinson off the bench.
Yeah, I think most of these other guys on Miami are just like, if you have that salary and you're trying to fill out a team, you can get to Duncan Robinson or Hero or Lowry, someone like that. But they're not someone that I'm setting out to make my lineups off of.
All right. So we have always, when in the case of the Bulls here, we have our two pay up options with DeRozan and Levine. If you're looking at one, granted, different position, so I get that, but just looking at paying up in this game, is there one player between the two that you like more often than not?
So I think overall, I think that you got some really good options on the Bulls. The major thing is that they're healthy, so that's a problem. You have all four of the big four out there, so that is a little bit of an issue. The second thing is they're not really priced down too much because they've had Vucevic out here quite a bit lately, so that's also an unfortunate thing. Uh, but on FanDuel in particular, their prices are not as bad, and they're still not getting very much attention on any site. So I think that this is a game that I'd rather go over weight on these guys, especially if their ownership projections are even remotely close. That all of the guys have some risk with them, but I think if they're so unpopular, you're going to have someone pay off, and it's just a low risk play. So Vucevic, since he's come back, he hasn't been super great. He's had 2 games that he's come back. He had 32 and 42 DraftKings points in those 2 games, 29 and 26 minutes in those 2 games. Both of those are below his average. The first game back, the 26 minutes, he fouled out in that game. I think you could tell he was definitely a bit winded and wasn't quite back to 100% shape, and was a little bit slow and getting in the wrong spots because he isn't a guy that typically fouls that much. So I think that was a little bit of an issue. The second game was a blowout. So I think he would have got close to a full run in that game had it gone not to be a blowout. So I do worry that he's, not 100% in the best condition as he normally has been, given those points these last 2 games. But I think that it's another one. It's like I am going to rather take the chance on him being able to come back and have a big game before people are jumping on it. So at his low ownership across the board, he's the guy that I'm going to be definitely over the field on. Also, DeRozan, he hasn't had a very nice time with Vucevic coming back. He's only scored 36 and 34 DK points in those 2 games. But, I think it's the same thing. All of that is kind of being baked into his ownership. People are staying away from him on DraftKings. We have him at a 2% ownership with a 10% boom probability. That's a pretty good ratio. I mean, the boom probability of 10% isn't something that you get super excited about. I'd rather have it be a bit higher than that. But when you have such a low ownership to start with, I think that makes a lot of sense to be able to go ahead and take some shots on him.
So I wanted to just follow up with Vucevic at 33 on Yahoo, seeing as far as him being back consistently, the minutes are there, but the matchup against Bam, assuming that with the Heat, as well as everybody else on this slate. Now, you don't have a Cat, you don't have Embiid, you don't have Jokic, you don't have one of those big names up there ahead of Gobert, I understand. At the same time, it seems like for 33, and again, I'm using the Yahoo price, but again, depending on where you have him, it seems like for the cost of Vucevic with the matchup itself and his ceiling not really being as high as what we've seen coming back, I would want to be more underweight to him than overweight to the field.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that makes, sense as well. He's definitely, his volatility is going to be there. I'm just hoping to more be on the side of, well, the whole field is not on him,
right?
And it makes sense that they're not on him, but when the whole field is thinking one way, I want to try to think a little bit different way. So that's kind of where I'm ending up at.
Fair, and especially if I'm representing the whole field, then that's fair. Nobody's going to argue with that. If you're fading me representing the field, then I think people will accept that just on the surface of it. All right, let's keep it moving here. And again, hit that thumbs up button. More of you popping in. We appreciate everybody hanging with us on this Saturday night. We've got about an hour and 25 minutes until this slate officially locks. So if you're hanging with us, we only ask one really of 2 things. You hit that thumbs up button immediately when you pop in here, and you're also subscribed to the Awesemo DFS, the odds, and the season-long fantasy football channel. So let's move on to Orlando at Cleveland. You see Orlando is a heavy dog on the road. Low, super low total we have here, Steve. I believe this is the lowest total on the slate. Yeah, by a little bit at 205.5. So Cleveland at home, the heavy favorite. We've talked a bunch about some guys here and some value with Cleveland being out some dudes. Also, though, on Orlando, Suggs has been a huge go-to. We had the explosion of Wendell Carter on the slate as well. So let's start with the Magic. Is it riding Wendell Carter night again tonight?
Yeah, so we've had Cole Anthony out again, and it looks like Wendell Carter has really benefited more so than what I might have thought initially. So the 4 games that Anthony's been out, we've saw 14 DK points, then 26, then 37, then 48. So, I mean, he has to score 60, I guess, tonight, right, at that pace. But even if he doesn't score that much, even if he scores in the 30s, I think he's going to be in a pretty good spot. And that's I think that's something that you're going to want in this slate. 5,800 on DraftKings. He is getting some ownership at 29%. Compared to a 30% boom score. So he's, that's going to make it a little bit more difficult to get to him. But if he gets one of those, huge games that he's had the last few, I don't think it's going to matter too much that his ownership is that high. So I do think that you'll want to take another shot on Wendell Carter, and I will do so as well.
What about Suggs on the slate?
Yeah, so last Saturday, we have a whole different situation than then. So we talked about Suggs a lot on this show. Right. He was 3,800 then. He's all the way up to 5,400 now. So that's a big price change on DraftKings. But even so, I don't think that is quite where he should be. I mean, he scored he hasn't really blown up a slate, but he's been pretty consistent. He did have one game he bombed where he had 11 DraftKings points, but the others, he's all been right around 30. We're projecting him around that range again. And at 5,400, like I said, there's not a lot of cost savings here today. So I think that he is another good spot to go to. Certainly him and Wendell Carter will be a little bit of, against each other for points, especially with how low of a scoring game it is supposed to be. But I do think that they both work fine in lineups, and I don't think they're chalky enough to do so either. So I like going that route.
Yeah, and Carter, just looking at the DK projected ownership here, he's the 3rd highest projected guy. We still have that Charlotte-Houston game, so we'll talk about both Bridges and Kevin Porter, who everybody in the chat is in love with. I get it. But it's not even that high. And I know it's 7 games here that we're talking about, so you're just under 30% on the slate. But for $5,800, as far as a workable player, you can definitely separate yourself by some higher cost guys on the slate, meaning the ownership for Carter Jr. shouldn't really be a deterrent, right, Steve, for tonight?
Yeah, I think that's how I see it. I agree with that. Even across the board, it doesn't look like he's getting to levels that are that high. And I think it's because the total is so low. People tend to stay away from games with lower totals. In this case, though, the prices are lower, so it kind of helps offset that.
All right, so for Cleveland, we see, especially for projections of ownership here, we see that the 2 guys that everybody is getting to, or the majority of people getting to, marketing at 5,600, and then the higher priced pay option there is, looking at Jared Allen, where you're going to pay a little bit more at 7,400 at the center spot. Now the ownership dips a little bit for Allen down to that 14.5% range, marketing a little higher though in that 22% range. So let's start with those 2 guys with the Cavs.
Yeah, so it's going to be pretty interesting. We have Evan Mobley returning, and I'm kind of curious how that's going to play out for the Cavs. One, and how this rotation is going to look exactly. And then just also 2, how they're going to, some of the rebounds are going to be split up. We have seen a lot of teams kind of split their rebounds up, where just a couple of guys kind of go after the ball a little bit more aggressively than others, while they kind of look to get others out in a break. So Cleveland is kind of playing more like an old style team with all these bigger guys. And I don't think it's going to be a major effect on Markkanen just because he's so cheap at 5,600, and we do need those savings. I mean, he did get 31 and 36 minutes The last 2 games, he had 31 and 36 points in both of those 2 games too. But he is going to be pretty popular too. So I don't know that I'm as excited about him as I was if, say, the last few games without Mobley. But I do think at his price point, I think he looks like he's got to be in your consideration again. He's just not someone I would go nearly over the field as much. And if you think about Jared Allen as well, I think he might be kind of similar. He plays big minutes no matter what, though. So he's played 37 and 38 minutes the last 2 games, both of those with Markkanen. Obviously, those are without Mobley, but I do think that he looks like he might be a pretty good play as well. But I'm just a little bit worried overall on Mobley, and it seems like the field is not, and that sometimes when that kind of brings my spidey senses up, I guess, a little bit when things change in the rotations a little bit and people are really confident in the plays that are going to be affected by those rotation changes. I start to get a little bit worried. I mean, yes, it's very possible these are their best players on a team that's not that good in a game that they can and should win, but it does worry me a little bit.
So I'm curious, before we move on to the Charlotte-Houston game, Rubio and Garland, they seem like they could be a little too expensive to get to on this slate.
Yeah, I think that's how I am as well. It is a slightly too expensive and slightly too popular for me. Overall, it does look like, if I want to say, to be fair, I guess Rubio on FanDuel is pretty cheap at 6,400. I think that's a fine place to go. But on DraftKings, he's at 6,900, where you also have less free money available. So maybe he's a guy that you could kind of split up across the sites if you're looking to get some action on him.
All right, man, let's keep it moving here as we hit Charlotte at Houston. Again, hit that thumbs up button. We appreciate all of you hanging here at Steve Buzzard on Twitter, at Shander Show for me, and take advantage of what we have here for you. We have links galore. You can get 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Just click on that link below. We're giving you stuff back here. We're giving you the opportunity to use all of our tools on the site. And all we ask is just hit that little thumbs up button on the bottom when you slide in here. So just crunching again and looking at projections from optimal lineups that pop up on Crunchers, and I was on FanDuel earlier. LaMelo is everywhere. He's all over the place, and he seems to be the guy from our own projections as far as a pay up option at the point, really across the board. Do you find yourself getting to a lot of LaMelo, maybe even overweight to the field with Ball tonight?
Yeah, I think LaMelo looks really good on FanDuel. His $9,500 price tag there compared to $10,400 on DraftKings is one of the bigger discrepancies across the sites. He does make a lot of sense on DraftKings as well, just to kind of be a little bit contrarian. His ownership isn't nearly as popular there, so I think that is a play that you could get to in some of your lineups, but as a cash lineup for LaMelo on FanDuel and in a lot of my tournament lineups, I think that he is definitely a go-to play there.
All right, so we have a super chat. We'll get to the super chat here in just a second from Jake, and we appreciate that. Super chat's definitely not necessary, but always appreciated. Let's look elsewhere. We have Bridges. You're going to pay up a little bit for Bridges on this slate here, but anywhere else beyond Bridges that you find yourself getting to? I don't know if both Rozier and Hayward kind of find themselves in that Rubio Garland scenario as well, but where else on Charlotte outside of LaMelo?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is we got Mason Plumlee missing a second straight game. So without Plumlee last game, it was PJ Washington that started. He got 28 DK points in 24 minutes. And I think that is probably a pretty reasonable expectation. We're expecting very similar minutes today. And with his salary at 4,400 on DraftKings, I think that there are there are not a lot of other great options that you can go to with better value. So I think that is a pretty good spot. He is getting some popularity. Actually, he's getting more popularity on FanDuel. I rather play him on DraftKings with the cost savings and the lower run than I would on FanDuel. So I think that Washington makes a really good play. Going back to Rozier and Bridges, I think both of those guys are okay plays as well. It looks like although it looks like Miles Bridges is getting a lot of love. He's all the
Yeah.
way up at 28% ownership.
Yes,
I
he
guess
is.
for that, I'm not so excited about him. I'd rather play Mikal Bridges, I guess, than him at that level. So I'll probably be under the field on Miles Bridges. I don't think he's a bad play per se. It's just that's a really high ownership for a guy that doesn't tend to offer a ton of upside. So I think that's one guy that I'll probably be going under the field on, and probably under the field on Rozier as well. Jalen McDaniels, though, is another one that is a little bit interesting. He's saw a few extra minutes with the injury to Plumlee, and at 3,200, that price tag is really pretty low across the board. 3,800 on FanDuel. He's also not getting much popularity, so he's not someone that you typically see a wide range of outcomes for. But all the guys that we've mentioned so far as pay up or pay down options have mostly been in that 4,000 to 5,000 range. We haven't really talked about too many guys at the 3,000 range. So if you really want to build your lineups a little bit differently, you are going to have to go to someone like McDaniels that has that lower tag, and he might be able to get you to some of the other pay up options. We said there aren't a lot of great ones, but there are a lot of guys that could blow up the slate. So I think that makes him pretty interesting.
You mentioned PJ, and clearly he's popping up all over the place from crunch to projection to ownership projections right there at the top. And it is interesting that both centers in this game are the two highest owned, at least projected. We'll talk about Christian Wood coming up in a second here, Steve. But Jake on the super chat, Hernan Gomez, Harden, or Luka and PJ Washington in the FanDuel tournament.
I think I would go probably with the PJ Washington side. I think that he looks like a really nice play at his price point, and I don't see a ton of difference between the different pay up options. So I'm going to go that side.
All right, so let's look at Christian Wood. I think that's an interesting place to start here with Houston, because we have not only a ton of ownership and a lot of people on the slate getting to Wood at 26.1%. We have projected on DK. Now he's at 7,200 clearly, but going up against Washington for the most part. So there is that element of the matchup, Steve, but there's also the fact that you'd have to counter a ton of ownership if you don't want to get to Wood.
Yeah, I think Wood is probably pretty good chalk. 25% might be a little bit high. 36% on FanDuel is even higher, but I think that you can still find a way to make it work out. So Jalen Green is out, and I think, he hasn't really missed a game this year, but we did see him miss the second half of last game. And when he went out last game, we immediately saw Şengün come in and for Green, but it was Garrison Matthews that started the second half. So it's a little bit unclear who is going to be the major playing time benefit from that. But I do think both of them should see a good uptick in playing time. So I'm going to guess that Şengün is the one that is a little bit better. Even if they get close to the same minutes, for instance, Şengün plays a lot better fantasy points per minute. He gets about double that Garrison Matthews does. So I think especially if Matthews is named the starter and people kind of shy away from Şengün, which is kind of like what his ownership is saying right now, I think that Şengün is kind of my preferred option there. In regards to, sorry, I didn't give a final answer there on Christian Wood.
No, I think that's a great point though, because you're going to get $3K, $10. You're going to get the cheapest for Şengün out there.
Yeah, absolutely, and not a lot of ownership.
No,
and I don't think that people are going to swap to him even if he is starting, and I don't think he has to start to pay off his salary either. So I think that he looks pretty good. Christian Wood looks good. Kevin Porter looks good. Also, he played 37 minutes and scored 35 points after missing a week. So that looks like a pretty good game for him on his way back. And he's still priced way down. So without Green, I think he should get, I don't know that he'll get any extra minutes from Green missing, but I think he should get some extra usage, and he seems pretty healthy. So I think he looks pretty good also. It's never fun playing a lot of Houston guys, but they are good for DFS. So I think it makes sense.
All right. Well, we've got 2 more games to get to. A couple of guys that are fun to play with by all means. We've got the Wizards in Dallas. So let's start with Washington. And I see it here as it's almost as the chat was anticipating the sidebar, us getting to this game. A lot of love for Beal popping up now as we hit this game in Dallas. So let's start with Bradley Beal himself and kind of look at ownership in the field and see where you are countering that.
Yeah, I think Beal is a pretty good option for a pay up. He's not someone that the field is going too heavy on, so under 10% ownership across the board. And he hasn't really been, super hot lately, but he has boom probabilities that are about twice that. And I think you want to get to guys like that. So he's another one of those pay up options that I'm not super excited about, but he is one that I think that if you're putting into your lineups, he makes a lot of sense to get there. So we also one other guy, we have Dinwiddie out. Last time Dinwiddie missed, we saw Holiday, Kispert, and Kuzma kind of pick up those minutes. Holiday is typically not the most exciting player, even if he gets extended minutes. I get suckered into playing him plenty, but he never seems to put up a big game when he has those extra minutes. He's just not a great fantasy player. Where we do see is if Kuzma gets big time minutes, he could be pretty interesting. He is priced fairly for his projection, but he also is a guy, and we saw a lot last year when Anthony Davis was out as well. He's a guy that can play pretty big minutes, and he can play them pretty well with the starting rotation. So he's a guy that, if he really gets all those minutes, and we saw it last time that Dinwiddie missed, he got 40 minutes and scored 50 DraftKings points. So that's definitely not his most likely outcome. His most likely outcome is that he gets maybe just a couple of extra minutes, kind of how we have projected. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if they played him huge minutes and he had a huge game.
Yeah, and if you believe in the narrative theories, I saw this on the chat here. I was scrolling up, but we have so many by the second, so I apologize that I can't specifically credit whoever came up with this, but he is definitely fired up with the whole thing with the sweater. So you could tell that Kuzma is fueled with hatred after all the hate that he got on that gigantic oversized pig sweater. So maybe that is enough to put him over the top. See Terry in the chat. He and Matt are coming your way in about 8 minutes live before lock. So make sure you stick here. Don't go anywhere. Hit that thumbs up button as we keep it moving. And we have this really Dallas. Let's look at Dallas on the other side here. We have Luka. Let's start with Luka. We'll talk about Kristaps and a little bit less there if there's some deeper value with possibly Hardaway. But Luka, the other, spend up option on this slate at the point. Do you find yourself heavy to the field here with Luka?
Yeah, Luka is way up pay up options. So you have to go all the way up to 11,500. He has been pretty good of late. He scored over 50 points in 6 of his last 7 games. He's back off of his injury. In that game, he had played 41 minutes with another 56-point game. So I know there's been a lot of disappointment for Luka. It started the season off a little bit slow, but since then he's really performed, pretty good, at least consistently. He just hasn't had like one of those big games that, 80-point DK point game that absolutely destroys the slate. So people kind of feel like he's down, but he's been pretty consistent, and it wouldn't surprise me if one of those huge games is coming pretty soon. It's tough to get to him, but having it be tough to get to him makes him all that more attractive because the rest of the field isn't either.
Yeah, so you look at him compared to Harden, right? I'm just looking at LaMelo. If you have those 3 as far as the pay up options at the point, who are you getting to the most versus the least?
Of Harden, Durant, and Don.
Oh, I'm sorry, Harden, Luka, and LaMelo.
And LaMelo. Okay,
Yeah.
LaMelo, I think as the very top. I see. For especially on DraftKings, Luka or LaMelo is by far the best. And I think overall, even on DraftKings, I would say slightly LaMelo, but it's pretty close. I think all of them make really solid plays, and they all have like their pluses and minuses with them. So I would probably end up LaMelo a little bit higher.
I feel like as Porzingis is getting better, the price for him is leaping faster than what we can expect from him on the floor. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, and he's got Luka back, but
Right.
he has scored over 40 DK points in 7 straight. So so his price is amazingly fair. Normally this is like the price that you see for a guy that is more like when Luka is out, but I think that you could pay up for him in a more pay up to be contrarian type of way.
Just to counter the field, or as far as just a counter, I should say, a pivot on the field.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
I mean, he's 36 on Yahoo. Again, it's not a gigantic slate, only 6 on Yahoo. So we take that Knicks game out. It's not the end of the world by any means, but I was just curious with that. What about Hardaway? He's going to be a little bit of a cheaper option. I don't know if that becomes a pivot for you or just somebody that you may not be getting to a lot.
Yeah. I don't really think Hardaway as much. I like Hardaway typically if either Luka or more importantly, Porzingis is out, but I think that he is a guy that you could get to if you really needed that type of deal. And then one thing I see here, Emery gives a super chat of
Yes.
Miles Bridges and double ups. I think that makes a lot of sense to go to him. Like I said, he is not like one of the most explosive guys that people love rostering, but his price tag is a pretty attractive one. Houston is a poor matchup. So, and there aren't a lot of good small forwards on the slate. So I do like going with that Bridges in a double up.
All right. And thanks again, as always, for the super chat. Definitely not necessary, but 100% appreciated. As we always ask for those thumbs ups, and make sure you're subscribed as well. So from Dallas, we hit our final game in Utah. We'll start with New Orleans and then end with the Jazz here. So Brandon Ingram is going to be the guy that I think is a good place. We also have Hart here, but I wonder if cost is moving up a little bit for him. Let's start with Ingram, who's still somewhat workable with his. I mean, he's 32 on Yahoo, so somewhat workable as far as cost is concerned. How much are you getting to Ingram tonight?
Yeah, I think Ingram makes a lot of sense. I'll be over the field on him. The major thing is that you're getting a full allotment of his minutes since he's came back. He's pretty much playing all the minutes that you would expect in those games, 7 games that he's been back. But he has busted in 3 of those games, and he hasn't really had a game that he's really blown up. So I think that's going to keep his ownership low. My hope is he finally gets to that spot where he is going to blow things up, and we can really get him going on the slate winner type of lineup. I also think Valanciunas looks pretty good. Looks like on DraftKings at 8,800, and I can see why. That is a pretty expensive price tag. He's only 7,500 on FanDuel and $35 on Yahoo. So big differences across the board there. The major problem, and I'm kind of going to just hope that this is a short-term thing and not as much a long-term thing, but since Ingram's came back, he's taken a step back significantly. He's only averaging 34 DraftKings points per game, whereas he averaged 45 while Ingram was out. So he did have 39 per game before Ingram went out with injury earlier in the year. So it is possible that he will kind of bump back up to that level, which is about the range that we have him projected at. But it just does worry me because the sample size of these games that Ingram's been back is 7 or 8 games. And that is a big enough sample size to say that 34 DraftKings points is a little bit worrisome. So he's still getting the minutes, but he's not, he's not getting loved by the public. It is worrisome to me a little bit. But I do think since the public is so far off of him, he might be a little bit interesting on DraftKings anyways.
All right, real quick, we have a super chat from Dustin. We have to hit the Jazz on the way out, but I am curious, just quick thoughts on Hart and Alexander Walker as possible pivots on this slate.
So both of those guys, I think, aren't super heavy interesting for me. The biggest one is probably Hart on Yahoo at $20. Looks pretty good. Alexander Walker, probably not as interested in.
All right, so Dustin on the super chat, House Jr. thoughts for Houston, dropped over 30 fantasy points last game at 3,500. Little late joining. Sorry if it's already been covered. Don't worry, Dustin, hit that notification bell after you hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons and you won't be late.
Yeah. I think House is. I worry a little bit that he's going to get the same type of minutes. That is certainly a way that he could throw off all of the other chalk, I guess, if he were to get big minutes. We've seen that occasionally at times. We are projecting him. Let me see how many minutes we're projecting him at right now. So we're projecting, let's see, sorry, wrong spot.
I had ownership up.
We're projecting him at 12 minutes.
Okay.
So, I have to be a little bit hesitant to get too excited about him there, but he is the type of guy that certainly they could randomly give, 25, 30 minutes to, and really kind of take a seat for Şengün and Jayshawn Tate and Eric Gordon and maybe some of these other guys, production, KJ Martin, some of those guys that we talked about earlier. So it would be a contrarian way. It's probably not the way that I'm going to go too often.
All right, brother, let's wind down here. Last team, last couple of guys to get to. It's all yours. We'll start with Donovan Mitchell and, really look at Rudy Gobert on this shorter slate for centers. And then if there's anybody else you were looking at, maybe a cheaper Mike Conley on the slate.
Yeah, I was kind of looking forward to Utah a little bit when I thought that Conley might sit earlier, but now that he's going to play, Utah's not someone I'm super excited to get to. They have their rotation pretty set. They're pretty healthy. And for the most part, you're going to see each of these guys kind of get the minutes that they're normally getting. So I'll probably get maybe a little bit of Gobert and Mitchell. Although even Mitchell is kind of getting a lot of ownership. So I'm not even super excited about that. He's only had one game over 40 points in his last 6. I was kind of looking up on him earlier. And yet he's still getting quite popular. So his price is coming down. And I think that's why people are, a little bit interested in him. He's not a guy that they're used to seeing at this price point. But overall, I think Utah is a team that I'm not looking to get too much.
Awesome stuff. At Steve Buzzard on Twitter. Thank him on Twitter after you break the slate tonight. Thank us right now by hitting that thumbs up button. And, of course, make sure you're subscribed. Don't go anywhere. Stay on. I'll sell you a pen next show. We only had 7 games here on this slate, but we had to get through everything here, so I can't go. Watch QVC, then I'll sell you stuff, okay? Here, I'm just interested in you buying an Awesemo subscription, more so than anything I'm selling on QVC, all right? We thank everybody for hanging with us here. Don't go anywhere, because Terry and Matt are coming your way right now on this very same stream for the Live Before Lock edition of the program. But we thank you all for hanging with us. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving, ate a lot of food. Steve will do it again next week. Thanks to Mike Awesemo producing. Thanks to you all out there. Again, hit that thumbs up button. Have a great weekend.
Just love this mix of players at the top of the board today. It's super interesting. And I get very nervous anytime I see Knicks at the top of the board. Okay.
There.
What's happening, Awesemo NBA DFS fans? Appreciate you guys hanging out. That was a killer strategy show that we just got from the guys there. And we are here to bring you all the way up to lock-in. We're going to stick around for a half hour after, talking some prize picks, our great sponsor over there. It is the Saturday, I think it's Saturday, after Thanksgiving. I'm still recovering from my food coma. I'm sure everybody out there is getting a little bit. We were talking a little bit about Christmas lights and the holiday spirit and, getting into all that part of the season now that everybody's, transitioning to whatever your holiday of choice is for the winter. But I'm here with Matt LaMarca, and our focus today, regardless of the fact that Christmas Vacation is on just over and over again this afternoon, we're here to talk NBA DFS. I've actually watched Christmas Vacation a time and a half already today. I might watch it again later. Pretty funny movie, but I'm here with Matt LaMarca. He's going to cut through the nonsense and talk about all the NBA DFS action. Matt, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing pretty well. Full disclosure is I'm kind of working on the DraftKings news desk, like as we speak. Don't tell anybody. But we just had a news dump. We got Evan Mobley in, Mo Bamba in, Terrence Ross in, Cam Reddish in, Bogdan Bogdanovic in. So I'm just giving those some.
So what I'm hearing is that the DraftKings app is like 3 or 4 minutes behind our News Gods updates. Because News God, I got to tell you, I'm going back to like 628. News God had that piece of information up there. I don't know. I'm hearing that the DK side of things might be a little slower than the Awesemo side, but So we'll give you a sec to get those updated, bud. While you're doing that, let me jump in. I'll do a quick read. We'll take care of some business off the top. Guys, hit the like, hit the subscribe. You guys should have already done that. I think we're approaching 500 likes before we even came on for this show. 470. There's 2,063 people watching us right now. I feel like we should get 30 more likes before this promo reads over and get us over the 500 just to start the show out. Thank Matt for the breaking news there. But guys, I'm sure that you're aware by now that we've got all kinds of premium tools and content at the site. We make things available for free to promote them during the week. And what you can find at the site today, Week 12 NFL player projections, NBA main slate ownership for everything that we're talking about right now, NHL player rankings. If you're playing NBA DFS tonight, which I assume you are since you're here to watch us, make sure to check out Adam's deep dive article. That's something that I go through every single day. It gives you a great overview and it's free on the site. Nobody goes that deep for free. So check out Adam's content. I know a lot of people in the chat were hoping that Adam would be here. I don't think he's ever on live before lock. He's got a lot of lineups to make, so we let him slide on those. But killer analysis from Adam. So if you're looking for his takes, hit the site, hit the deep dive article. Matt, how we doing on the news? You need me to go?
I'm ready to roll.
We're back. We're back. Yeah, Mike. Mike Awesemo just grabbed a quote there and dropped it in the chat. And let's soundbite that one and we can throw that up somewhere. I appreciate that, Mike. Mike doing a great job behind the glass here. So, Matt, let's talk turkey on NBA DFS here. What are we seeing just kind of from a slate overview kind of a situation? For me, I'm seeing a lot of kind of lower mid-range price-wise, let's say, values, a lot of discount values. So is that the kind of slate you're seeing? What kind of shape are your lineups taking today?
Yeah, it's definitely, there's a lot of guys popping in that sort of 4 to 6K type range. Especially like at the guard spot, there's a lot of value tonight. So I do think it's kind of looking like a somewhat of a balanced slate. I'm not saying you can't afford to fit a star or two into your teams, but there's really no Giannis's on this slate. There's no Nikola Jokic's. So the price tags are a little bit more reasonable on DraftKings than we've seen on some other night. It's a little bit easier to have a more balanced squad.
Yeah, definitely. And that was something that I was taking note of. We do have a Luka on the top of the board here, salary wise and point per minute wise. And then you get LaMelo for significantly less money on both sites, different price tiers across the sites for him. But you're talking about an immediate dearth of stars. You get Durant and Harden, of course, in the 1.30 fantasy point per minute range star-wise. Jimmy Butler's on the slate as well. It's not like there's a lack of names necessarily, but those extreme point per minute, the 1.7 that we're getting out of Nikola Jokic, the 1.6 whatever for Giannis this season. To your point, yeah, we don't have those extreme pay-ups. And yeah, I think a lot of it is definitely focused on the guards, especially on the FanDuel slate. I ran before we started the show. I just ran some unencumbered, no randomness, just straight off the top, optimal type of lineups in Fantasy Cruncher, and it got to 200 and I think 5 lineups on FanDuel before all 3 of Quickley, Kevin Porter Jr., and LaMelo Ball were not at 100%. So across the first 205 optimal lineups, quote unquote optimal, those guys were just coming in every single time. And you get some interesting positional flexibility around those guys. So yeah, I think there's some really interesting builds available, particularly around the multi-position between some of these point guard, shooting guards, small forwards, and then the oddball on FanDuel with the small forward power point guard eligibility on Kevin Porter. Do you have any favorites from among the guard tiers that we can kind of dive into? Start going position by position. Is that where you want to start out on the guards?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Let's start with the guards. I do think that of the 2 value guys you mentioned, Quickley and Porter, both guys going to be strong options for you. You know, both guys we have projected for over 40% ownership on FanDuel. Not nearly as chalky on DraftKings, but still the 2 highest owned guards. Of those 2, I would be much more inclined to get away from Porter on this slate.
Okay.
I think first off, the higher salary is a concern. You know, he needs to do a little bit more to pay off his price tag. And Porter, even without Green on the court this season, he's still only averaging 1 DraftKings points per minute. So that's still, it's a nice number, right? If he plays 30 to 35 minutes, he can get us 30 to 35 DraftKings points, but we haven't really seen the willingness to let him go out and run that much. You know, like I'm just pulling up his minute projection that we have for him at the moment, but yeah, 33.1. I think that's reasonable. You know, I would be surprised if he's going to get to that 36 threshold. And we have Quickley projected for right around 30 as well. He's been better on a per minute basis with Walker and Rose off the court than Porter has with Green. So I just think given the price differential, I'm more willing to eat the chalk with Quickley than I am with Porter.
Yeah, and it'll probably surprise nobody out there. Knicks homer here, and I always, like I was saying before we started up, I get a little nervous when I see my Knicks at the top of the board, but I think Quickley makes a hell of a lot of sense here. You're getting him at 4,100 on the FanDuel slate, 43 over on DK, a guy with multi-position on the FanDuel slate for that price, and just, yeah, it's a killer spot for him and for the opportunity with a 30-minute projection. You mentioned both point guards and a number of other rotation pieces out for the Knicks. It's just a really... They're very shorthanded tonight. So there's going to be a lot for everybody to do. Is there any concern when it comes to Quickley? And he's, for me, a foundational building block. Just plug him in and don't really sweat it. But is there any concern in like a basketball sense, knowing how Tibbs coaches, knowing that they have other guys who are capable of handling the ball, other guys who are capable passers, distributors of the ball? Is there any concern if Quickley gets off to a weak start that he maybe gets limited and undercuts these minutes by a significant enough margin to matter? Is that a factor for you at all?
Yeah, it's something I'm thinking about. You know, Tibbs really has not given Quickley the run that, you know, Knicks fans want, like yourself. I'll throw myself in there too as a native New Yorker. But yeah, like we have Alec Burks projected for 26 minutes. Would it shock me if Burks was closer to 30 and Quickley was closer to 26? I think that's a very reasonable, you know, swap that you can consider. But I just think that at the price tag we're talking about, there's very little downside with Quickley at this point. Even if he plays 20 minutes, he can give us 5x. So anything after that is really just gravy.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not. We're on theme. We're talking turkey. We're getting gravy. I love it. But yeah, Burks was a guy who I kind of had in mind. It's definitely $1,000 more on the FanDuel slate, 600 more on DK with multi-position between shooting guard and small forward kind of interests me. We've seen Tibbs give Burks the ball handling duties in the past in this kind of a situation. And then we know Julius Randle, capable distributor of the basketball, is a bigger guy. 24.7% assist share is phenomenal for a power forward center play. So I would be getting to some Randle shares. Are you getting, not to, you know, jump ahead too much, but are you getting to any of Randle or any Evan Fournier or RJ Barrett, or are you kind of mostly focused in on Quickley and then maybe some Burks?
I think Randle is a core play for me on FanDuel. I mean, he's 8,700 on FanDuel. That is way cheap. we've seen him priced closer to 10K with the team at full strength.
Yeah.
And, like you alluded to, it's not just the guards that are out. We've got no Nerlens Noel and no Taj Gibson. Or did Noel get ruled in? I can't remember.
No,
Either
he's
way,
out. Last I saw, he was out.
Okay. Either way, extra minutes for the big guys as well. So I think, maybe even if the days of Randle playing, 38, 40 minutes on a nightly basis are over, he's still a guy who can give us 1.4, 1.5 fantasy points per minute. And if he does that over 34, 35, 36 minutes, something like that, 8,700 is a steal for him against the Hawks. The Hawks have been a little bit better defensively of late. They're still a below average team in terms of defensive efficiency. So I think Randle, after Quickley, he's like the Knicks guy that I'm really honed in on.
Yeah, he was my, I went Quickley, and then I without even looking where he was on the board, I just kind of plugged Randle into my placeholder lineup, just assuming that he would look good. And I was pretty happy with, in particular, his leverage score. It might catch up now that there's the confirmation on some of the other news about the bigs, but he was at 5.1 in terms of the FanDuel leverage, 5.5 at a much higher price on the DraftKings slate. He's super interesting for me on the FanDuel slate, and you get another guy with positional flex between power forward and center. It's just a great option. So going back to guard, we talked about two of the more extreme value plays on the board. From the top end, there's a couple guys in two different price tiers that are popping to the top. I mentioned one of them when I mentioned how frequently it was coming up in the FanDuel crunch, and he's coming up a lot on the DK one for a bigger salary as well. That's LaMelo Ball. And then another guy at shooting guard on FanDuel, point guard, shooting guard eligible on the DK slate, who's coming up much more optimal on FanDuel, but still interesting, I think, for the 8,600 price, is Devin Booker. Are you getting to either one of those guys? Do you have a preference between the two in terms of a pricier guard that we might be able to build to?
Booker is not somebody that I have landed on a bunch of on this slate. I just think there are some other guards that I like a little bit more. I mean, certainly you can't fault the spot against the Nets. That game's got a 225.5 total. That's the second highest mark on the slate. But I find myself getting to Ball a lot. I just don't know if the perception of him has caught up to his like actual ceiling. And yes, he's expensive on DraftKings at 10.4, but this is a guy who has nightly 60 fantasy point upside. And again, we're talking about he's facing the Rockets, who have played at the fastest pace in the league, are below average defensive team. To me, he's right at the top of the list of studs that you want to consider on this slate. He's a very strong, almost like a way overweight play for me on FanDuel at 9,500. I think that salary is just kind of a joke. I think the 10.4 is much more accurate on DraftKings. And since he's only checking in with 14% ownership, I have no problem going to 25, 30% on him and sort of doubling up the field that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. You sort the DraftKings board. And if we're just looking at like that star caliber tier, I just resorted it by salary. And I did this in my article today that works off of the optimal lineup rates, the leverage scores. If we're just looking at salary with Luka up at the top at 11.5, LaMelo's the fourth most expensive DK player at 10,400. If we're looking at the boom score probability, he's got an 18.3%. Nobody above him has a higher mark. And you have to go down all the way to Miles Bridges at 7,900 before you find anybody on the entire slate that has a higher boom score probability than LaMelo. The same thing is true with the same guy. You have to go down to Miles Bridges to find a guy who comes up more optimal than LaMelo. So even at that heavy price, he's an extremely good play for me. And like you said, on the FanDuel slate, that's a lock and load kind of a play for me. I don't know that it's an actual literal lock, guys, but if I'm running 150, he's in 135 of them easy. So that's definitely a play I'm intrigued by. What are some of the other guards? We've hit on a couple of the highlights. There's a ton of good, capable guard players. We've got the Bulls on the slate with DeRozan and Levine. We've got Trae Young, of course, going up against the shorthanded Knicks for what looks like a pretty fair price on FanDuel, and not a bad price, certainly, for his talent on DK, his explosive upside. Either of those guys, or are there any other guys that are really popping off the page for you at the guard spot?
I really like Darius Garland. We've seen him kind of do everything for the Cavaliers since Colin Sexton went down. And, the fact that Garland was limited in his first game back because of an injury, and now we're getting Evan Mobley back in the lineup, I think that's going to scare a few people off. But I think Garland the minutes should come up in his, sort of his second game now removed from this head injury. And he still is a guy that I project to be like a 30+% usage type player. So getting him at 7,600 on DraftKings, he's even a little bit cheaper than that, I believe, on FanDuel, 7K on FanDuel. Like, to me, those are great price tags for him.
Yeah, for sure. And then it looks like we're getting some probably minor news. Tyler Hero. Looks like he's questionable, is saying started to feel a little bit off last night, and says COVID related. He'd be reportedly treated differently by the team. So still questionable. Any changes for you in terms of Tyler Hero?
Yeah,
and is he making any impact there?
Hero's been excellent for them this year. He's not somebody that I have any of at the moment, just because his price tag has gotten, pretty expensive across the industry. But I think you take him out of the lineup and certainly the other guys on the roster become more interesting. Kyle Lowry, Bam, Jimmy Butler. I think you would have to give all of them slight bumps, but I don't think that this is a matchup that I want to, really have a huge stake in. Right.
It wasn't one that was coming up much for me at all.
The Bulls and the Heat, right? Two just very good defensive teams. The total on this game sits at right around 210 points. This is a game to be underweight on in general, I think.
Yeah, anytime we're seeing something that's trending that low in terms of the Vegas total, for sure. And then these are just two teams that we've got that factor, and then they've also just got a lot of capable guys who's they share the ball fairly well between them. But I feel like to a degree, some of these guys cannibalize one another's production a little bit. Now with Hero coming out, maybe you get a little bit of upside from like a Duncan Robinson in the 5K range, but nobody that I'm super psyched to get to. So yeah, it's just not anything where I'm going out of my way. There are teams where I'll take shares of the stars when I get them. Like if there's just 9,800 sitting on my board and I have not that much Jimmy Butler, I'm happy to take an extra couple shares of Jimmy Butler at positive leverage here and there, but it's certainly not somebody I'm targeting or really going out of the way for. Any other breaking news that you've spotted in terms of impact to guards in the last few minutes since we've started up, so we can go through some of those? Terrence Ross, any impact there?
I just saw Jalen Brunson in. Jalen Brunson out. Jalen Brunson out. That matters. Jalen Brunson's been a pretty good player for the Mavericks this season. He hasn't been as needed recently with them getting sort of closer to full strength. But I think, if I run a quick on off here, I'll tell you what the numbers sort of look like with Brunson. But I would have to imagine that taking his usage rate out of the lineup definitely matters on this slate.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, it's a guy that's seeing 29.2 minutes a night, 21.5% usage. And for the money on a lot of slates has been, pretty worthwhile, even in that role, 1.01 fantasy points per minute. We know what he is when Luka's not on the court, of course. But yeah, I think that has an interesting impact. We had him pegged for 25.8 minutes. So it's going to leave a bit of an impact in terms of the available minutes, the available usage. And if you get to that, we'll go through what some of the upticks look like. But maybe a couple additional looks for a shooter like Timmy Hardaway Jr. Maybe a couple additional looks for a shooter like Reggie Bullock. Even in he's projected at 23 minutes to be out there. Maybe he gets a few extra minutes, a few extra looks, just in terms of some guard play that's available. All right, is anybody really standing out to you in terms of the changes in what taking Brunson out of there does?
It looks like, Luka sees a bump. He gets up to right around 1.55 DraftKings points per minute. It looks like, I'm sorry, that Doncic has not been great without Brunson on the floor this year. That was going back to last year. This year, his numbers have actually really struggled without Brunson. The Mavericks offense in general is averaging 91 points per 100 possessions. Can that be right? The Mavericks are averaging 91.8 points per 100 possessions without Jalen Brunson on the floor. If that's the case, that is alarming. that
is shocking. Wow. I knew he was valuable, but I didn't think he was that valuable. Oh my God. What does that do to the nature of this game? If that's accurate for you, does that kind of take these guys a little bit more off the board? Like, do you give Luka a downgrade because of that? Or do we maybe not sweat it and just rely on Luka being Luka and just going to turn those numbers around at some point, and we want to be early rather than late on it?
Yeah, I would say Luka for sure is safe either way. It's more, is this a team that you want to, load up on the ancillary pieces? I am just double checking this just to make sure that it's correct here. But yeah, like Brunson has been a key for them this year. So I'm not surprised that their offense has struggled without him. But yeah, 91.8 points per 100 possessions is a pretty rough sample size. And we're talking over 284 minutes. It's not a nothing sample size either. So yeah, I would have to kind of be skeptical of some of these guys. You know, again, Luka is somebody that you're always going to want to have some exposure to. He is Luka. He can go off, but Porzingis is now, you know, kind of fairly priced across the industry. He's 87 on DraftKings, 88 on FanDuel. I don't know if I'm really willing to consider him given their struggles and, you know, Porzingis in particular under a fantasy point per minute when playing without Brunson this year. So like that's a pretty significant decrease from what we've seen from him.
For sure. Yeah, that is going to be an interesting factor and something that honestly is probably somewhat hidden from a lot of the public when they're thinking about that. It's just, Brunson, I play him when Luka Doncic isn't in and I don't worry about him otherwise. But we can see that there's a clear impact there. So that's very, very interesting for the effects on that team. Another team that I thought there might be some interesting plays from, and I wrote about Joe Ingles on my article earlier because he was coming in at a cheap price. And I thought Mike Conley was going to sit on the second night of a back-to-back, but it looks like Conley's going to be good to go. Does that have any impact? I know the chat was talking a little bit about Donovan Mitchell, thinking he'd be low on, but he's in a quarter of FanDuel lineups and 20% of DK lineups and coming in at pretty negative leverage for me on both sites. He's kind of I'll take him where I get him in small shares, but I'm not looking to be around the field on Donovan Mitchell. Is there any appeal to the Utah backcourt for you at this point with Conley confirmed in?
I think the move is you play Mike Conley. You know, I think that a lot of people who build their lineups early in the day are going to have X'd him out, you know, assuming that he would sit. And it will result in more ownership than normal for a guy like Donovan Mitchell or Joe Ingles, Jordan Clarkson. So I think from a game theory perspective, the guy that you want to target here is Clarkson. And the Jazz are in a really good spot against the Pelicans. They have the third highest implied team total on the slate. The only real concern is they are 13-point favorites. So perhaps this game does turn into a blowout, but I think Conley's interesting just from a pure game theory perspective. He's somebody that I'm overweight on, and it wouldn't shock me if he checked in with like a sub 5% ownership today.
I tell you what, I like that call a lot. I wasn't thinking necessarily along those lines, but the numbers bear it out in our last update. 8.4% ownership on FanDuel, 8.1 on DK, coming in more optimal than that on both sites. So you're getting them at positive leverage, sneaky little play. I like that a lot. What else from the guard spot before we do another quick read and move on to some forwards and some centers, and we'll take some questions and everything, guys. We appreciate everybody hanging out. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. What other guards stand out to you? Anybody we haven't really touched on at the guard spot?
Not really. I have some Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal is somebody that's showing up pretty positively leveraged for us. It's kind of been a disappointing season for Bradley Beal truthers like myself. You know, I was expecting a really big year from this guy playing without a stud point guard for the first time in his life, but it hasn't really happened. You know, maybe the Spencer Dinwiddie on today's slate helps him. You know, it's kind of a one-man show at this point. So I am definitely overweight on Bradley Beal, but I think we've hit on a lot of the other players.
For sure. And just real quick, since they popped in front of me and they are somewhat relevant, I guess, on the DK slate in terms of sorting by our optimal lineup rate, these annoying Orlando guards, and I'm talking about Jalen Suggs, I'm talking about Franz Wagner here, although on DK, Wagner's a small forward, power forward, FanDuel's small forward shooting guard. But Suggs in particular, 13.6% optimal, over-owned for that number, salary at $5,400 at this point on the DK slate. Any interest there, or is he a guy that you're just kind of happy to get away from now?
Yeah, I think the price has gotten to a point where I'm comfortable being out on him. You know, I have some here and there, but I'm definitely underweight compared to the field. The problem with Orlando is that even without Cole Anthony, we haven't really seen him get that extended run that we were looking for. You know, he's kind of seems capped at around 30 minutes, and that's only if the Magic stay competitive, which has been a real problem for them recently. And then you look at today's slate, right? You would think a matchup versus the Cavs, you know, they should be able to stay in that game, but they're 10-point underdogs. Their implied team total right now is at just under 98 points. Like, this is just not a team that has provided us very much recently. So, you know, you can have some Wagner, you can have some Suggs, but they're not guys that I'm taking a stand on. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely not like the standout value play that he kind of looked like the last few weeks and yeah, or the last few days. To your point, 24 minutes over the last 30 minutes, 17, 25, going back a game before that, 32, but 26 before that. So it's unpredictable at best, and it's not cresting over that 30-minute a night average that we really wanted to get from him. So not really a standout play for me. Let's take care of some business real quick here, guys. We've flown through a lot of analysis without doing too many reads or anything. So everybody who's here presumably knows about Awesemo.com by now. You've heard us talk about the Platinum plan. That's the one that includes access to everything, guys. It includes every sport we cover, projections, ownership, all the different tools, the boom bust, the top stacks, everything that we talk about, all the tools and content that guys like Alex use to win hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars every week, every year, every week. Ooh, that would be beautiful. So that would be sweet. Yeah, that would be aggressive though. So for $29.95 a week, you can get on that Platinum plan. And if you use the promo code NBA Live, we're leaving off the before lock. It's just NBA Live. Promo code gets you 25% off your first week. So hit that up, get on the site. If you're only interested in NBA, you can sign up for our NBA weekly package for only $16.95, or we go down to the entry level, the Express package that includes access to our rankings for projections, our rankings for ownership. So we're not giving you the actual numbers. We're telling you, hey, this is the order in which we expect these guys to be ranked, so to be owned. So if you're a new player, if you're just getting into DFS, want to get your feet wet, you just want to check out how our data and content work, it's a great way to get in. It also includes access to full projections for showdown and single game contests for the ones that we cover. So those are big values there. So stop guessing, guys, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. I'm going to clean up the Prize Picks read here as well real quick, guys. This is our beloved sponsor today, and they've been very patient with me not getting to them off the top, but they've got daily prop-based contests. There's no sharks, no optimizers, no mass entry. You don't have to worry about guys like Alex chewing up the field with 150 well-built, phenomenal entries. All you need to do is go there. You pick your favorite props. You can use our free tools on the site where we're giving you Alex's probabilities of those props hitting with the win rate, and you build a 5-player lineup. If you hit your 5-player lineup, that can win you 10 times your entry fee. Use your knowledge of multiple sports. They've got cross-sport entries, so you can grab a few plays from the NBA, a few plays from NFL, and mix and match your card the way that you want to. Download them in the App Store, Google Play, or on PrizePicks.com. You can use our free player props, like I mentioned, and we've got a promo code running. Promo code Awesemo, all caps. Everybody knows how to spell it, I hope. Some people apparently stick another O in there, but it's Awesemo, guys. Just like on the website, you get a $100 first match deposit bonus. Pretty solid deal. We've got a 30-minute bonus show coming up next. We're going to stick around and run through some Prize picks too. So I hope everybody sticks around and hangs out with us. We're going to go through some breaking news, talk about the ownership factors in some of these other sites. But before we get to that point, we got some forwards and some centers to talk about on the DK and FanDuel slates. So, Matt, what are we seeing in terms of the forward spot? We'll bundle both the forward positions together with all this multi-position eligibility. Who are your favorites? And are you seeing it more as like a value or more as like a bit of a pay up spot into at least the upper mid range?
Yeah, I think you can go in a few different directions. I think like Kevin Durant to me stands out on FanDuel. He's 10,300 there. He's somebody that I'm overweight on compared to the field. We haven't projected for just 13% ownership today. If you look over on DraftKings, he's up into the 11th, so or close to it. So I definitely think that that's a price tag we can take advantage of with KD. But there are plenty of guys in the mid to low range that make sense as well. Wendell Carter is going to catch plenty of ownership coming off of last week's game. You've got the Bridges brothers, no relation, are both going to catch plenty of ownership. Lauri Markkanen is somebody that I really like today, even with Mobley back in the lineup. I think Mobley is limited in his first game back. I don't think that's a hot take to go out on that limb. So yeah, there are plenty of different directions that you can go in, but I do think that of that group, Markkanen is probably my favorite.
And talk a little bit about what you expect the impact to be there of Mobley coming back. You mentioned he's probably going to be a little bit limited. We've got a 32-minute projection on Markkanen, and that makes him stand out to me on the FanDuel slate in particular. A nice positive leverage score. I think maybe the crowd is sweating that Mobley return decent pricing across the industry. So what overall impact do you think he has in terms of the fantasy point per minute production? And knowing that you do like him a lot, is it at least like a lingering concern in your mind, or are you just firing away and totally comfortable with that play?
Yeah, there's definitely some concern. I mean, Mobley has been much better than I expected this year. So often we see these, big guys come into the league and they're just like, they're stiffs. And Mobley is really good. I have been proven wrong on my Mobley hate pre-draft, but we have him projected for 32 minutes. I would take the under on that. I think that the Cavs know that he's sort of their future. I would expect him to be at 30 or less. And either way, we have Mobley projected for 32. We have Markkanen projected for 32. So I think Markkanen's minutes should be safe either way. But again, like Markkanen, I think for his price tag, he's giving us good production here.
And sticking in that same front court, if we look to Jarrett Allen, who does have power forward eligibility on the FanDuel slate at 7,600, what do you think the impact from both Markkanen and Mobley on Jarrett Allen is? Are you willing to play Jarrett Allen in the same situation here, or is there a greater impact? And maybe the price has an impact as well.
Yeah, I think Allen is probably the most likely to suffer. I mean, he was up over 36 minutes, over 38 minutes in his last two games. So if he comes back down to a more reasonable 34, 32, something like that, I do think that he has more to lose when you factor in the increased salary. So I would rather roll, Markkanen is still significantly cheaper. And, he's a pretty good per minute producer.
Yeah, and an excellent optimal lineup percentage, solid boom score, one of the higher end boom score probabilities on the DK slate. Takes a little bit of a haircut at the 6,300 price on FanDuel, but I do like the positional flexibility. Power forward, small forward is an interesting option. A lot of these guys go power forward center, so you can actually work him in with a bunch of these other plays that we're going to talk about at the power forward spot, at the center spot. So I just love the increased flexibility that he gives you. Talk to me about the Bridges, the Bridges non-brothers. Which one is your favorite tonight from site to site, and does it change from site to site?
Yeah, I think if you're looking on FanDuel, you kind of have to be in on Mikal Bridges, right? He's priced at just 5,100, and he has been, pretty consistently providing value at a similar price tag or even higher of late. The minutes are there. Like, the guy's just a solid player. The ceiling might not be there. That's the only concern, is that the ceiling seems to be capped, at like 30 to 35 on his absolute best night. That makes him a less ideal tournament play than like a cash game play. But I think just as far as value goes on FanDuel, he's really standing out. And then Miles, right? He's had a phenomenal year. He's really taken a step forward. He's kind of operating as the Hornets, top scoring option, coming off a terrible game in his last outing, but you can say that about most of the team. The salary has come down a little bit. I think that this is a pretty nice spot to buy low on him.
Yeah, he's a guy I've been looking to a decent amount, and probably not enough early on because I wasn't necessarily an early believer in the breakout. I mean, we're only 21 games.
There with you.
Yeah, 21 games into the season, though. I mean, the guy's jumped from 0.89 fantasy points per minute on 17% usage last year to 1.08 this year on 22.7%, seeing 36.4 minutes a night. We've got him projected right around there, 35.3. So, yeah, it's kind of a solid spot for Bridges, even with a little negative leverage. That's a play. It's not like a foundational value play. It's not a superstar level play, but it's a guy I'm happy to roster even with a little ownership weight on him because I'm going to be getting different with some of these other plays we've talked about. So he's definitely finding his way in. And yeah, to your point, Mikal on the FanDuel slate in particular was in my placeholder and will probably be there. I am concerned on the ceiling, but it's kind of the price is right enough that if he comes in around that median and you get enough production from some of your other spots, it probably doesn't kill you. Maybe doesn't vault you into the very top spot, but you're still going to be a contender, I think, if you're getting maybe a little bit more than the median, but not a ton more from him, which is around what I expect. Any other guys from any of the pricing tiers? Let's talk in terms of the higher end. This guy's actually a mid-range guy. Christian Wood, 7,000 on the FanDuel slate, 7,200 center only on the DK slate. Power forward eligible on FanDuel, which is why I brought him up at the last second there and pivoted. What do you think of Christian Wood tonight? Any concerns on him, or is he somebody that you're kind of looking towards, especially with the positional flex on FanDuel?
Yeah, Wood, I think, is a guy that sees a pretty nice bump here with Green out of the lineup. He's kind of fits that same mold that we talked about with Bridges, though, where he's checking in with a pretty severely negative leverage score in the boom bust tool. We have him projected for 35% ownership on FanDuel. I think 7K is a really good price tag for him, but when you factor in 35% ownership, it does hurt him in that regard. The one thing I will say is that if I'm going to eat some chalk here, the game that I want to do it in is Rockets Hornets, right? Like that game has the potential to be the highest scoring of the night by a pretty sizable margin, in my opinion. You've got two teams that really don't play a lot of defense and play very fast. You know, by today's standards, at least, these teams are playing exceptionally fast in what has been a slow-paced year. So it would not shock me if this game provided a few different players in the winning lineup.
Yeah, for sure. And this game sitting at a significantly higher total. This game and the Suns-Nets game, the first one of the night, significantly higher total than all the other ones on the board. And we've seen that throughout the season. We're not getting those games up into the 230 kind of stratosphere. The highest projected games are in these mid 220s, and then a lot of other games in the lower to mid teens. So yeah, it's a spot that I definitely want to target. Anticipating a question that's probably going to come up in chat in the next couple seconds after you went through that. Do you have a cap on how many players total from this game that you would be willing to get to in lineups from site to site? And then from team to team, do you have a total, or are you just kind of letting the optimizer optimize and letting fly?
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely have a few game stacks where I have, 6, 7, even 8 players in this game. Because like weird things happen, right? We just saw the Lakers and the Kings go to triple overtime, right? So I will have some game stacks just in case this really, really shoots out. But yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with, 2 players on each side, like in a good majority of your lineups. I think that, again, pairing them together and getting some correlation where you're going to, you're not going to get a blowout. You're going to get, multiple things to happen in the same game. Like, I think that's actually a good strategy. Anytime you can build positive correlation into your lineup, it's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. Taking that same concept from a different angle, how many lineups, if you're building 150 lineups, let's say on DraftKings, how many lineups would include no one from this game?
I haven't really thought about it like that. That's a good question. I would be comfortable with 50 out of 100.
Okay, a little bit more than I thought. That's a little more aggressive than I thought. I'm glad I asked that question. That's a
the thing about this
different way to look at it.
That is kind of tough is that you do have LaMelo all the way up at the top, and then you've got Bridges is pricey. Christian Wood is on the pricier side. Like there isn't that. The one thing this game is kind of lacking is that slam dunk value play. So I think you can sort of mix and match here and there. You can load it up. And if there are lineups that, if you're building 150, sometimes it's just going to happen that you're not getting players from a particular game in your team. I don't think you need to go and force one in there.
Makes sense. It looks like we're getting some breaking news that might be somewhat important in here. So we're going to skip the Hall of Fame read. Everybody knows about the Awesemo Hall of Fame. If you come in top 3 in a contest with more than 5,000 people in it, send us a screenshot on the Twitter handle Awesemo HOF, then email me and send me the same screenshot at the supported Awesemo address, and we will get you set up with a free month. Moving on to the news. Alec Burks starting at point guard for the New York Knicks, and Royce O'Neal out. Does that do anything with either of those teams, especially in terms of Emmanuel Quickley with Alec Burks starting at the point on New York?
Yeah, I kind of have had him penciled in as the starter for me all day. I still think Burks sees significant minutes, or Quickley sees significant minutes off the bench. If you wanted to increase your Burks ownership and decrease your Quickley ownership based on that news, I think that would be okay. But I still think Quickley is the guy that you want more of in that pairing. The O'Neal news is very interesting to me because he quietly is kind of like a minute hog for them, right? And now his absence, maybe we see a few more minutes from Rudy Gay tonight. And Rudy Gay is always someone who is intriguing to me when we expect him to play more minutes because we know that he is a very solid per minute guy. I mean, he hasn't played a ton of games yet this year, but he's at 1.04 DraftKings points per minute, and he's only 3,400. So Gay becomes somebody that I definitely will have sprinkled in as a value play. Joe Ingles, we kind of talked about him earlier. He was somebody that I wasn't super in on with the news that Mike Conley was going to play, but now his stock takes a hit in the positive direction. So there are definitely some guys who will benefit in this Jazz game. And again, the Jazz are a team that we expect to do well offensively today.
Yeah, and maybe this is a situation where we talked about the potential for blowout and all of that, but then you start saying, all right, we're going to get more minutes potentially for Rudy Gay. I'm not necessarily sure that they're going to be concerned about running Rudy, even if they're blowing this other team out. I don't think they're going to really be too concerned about leaving him out there. And at 4,400 power forward, small forward on FanDuel, 3,400 small forward, power forward on DK. I think that's going to be a little bit sneaky, because I think people, and it looked like in chat, the first instinct was to look to Ingles. So I think people might just lean that way and sleep on Rudy Gay a little bit there. So that makes a lot of sense. There was your Rudy Gay quote for chat. Moving on, it looks like, let's see what other pieces of news we have. Anything breaking that you've spotted that you want to call out in terms of news other than those two pieces?
Only other thing is we've got confirmation that Mobley will be in the starting lineup. I don't think that really qualifies as breaking news, but Garland, Okoro, Markkanen, Mobley, and Allen for the Cavs tonight.
Yeah, certainly basically what we expected there, and we talked that one through. So if you guys are looking for that take, you can rewind a little bit, but let's take a jump over any other forwards before we move on to the center spot here, and then maybe tackle a couple questions in the next few minutes. We didn't talk through.
Yeah, I think most of the guys that I would like to sort of throw in as an add-on also have center eligibility. So let's roll the center.
Makes sense. So looking at the center board, then we've got those guys that are locked into the center only spot. And then we've got the flexible guys between the center and the power forward. Gives us a lot of different ways to put these things together. In terms of just the entire board of center eligible guys, who are your top plays?
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming back to Christian Wood as a top play, especially like he's just very underpriced on FanDuel. I'm having a brain meltdown.
Let me throw you one. What do you think? A guy we didn't talk about in a pacey game with a high total, LaMarcus Aldridge, center and power forward eligible on FanDuel, center only on DK, 5,600 on DK, 6,200 on the FanDuel slate. Coming up a little bit more optimal than I thought he might when I'm sorting by that. Nice little boom score probability, particularly on DK with the low price. Any interest in LMA here?
Yeah, I think we can throw Aldridge into the group of Miles Bridges, like guys I should have been playing earlier in the year, and I just didn't believe in them quick enough. Now that he's priced up a little bit, it's harder to get in on him, in my opinion. And we do have him as a pretty negatively leveraged play. I'm okay with being out on him on FanDuel. At 5,600 on DraftKings, I do think that's a price where you're going to want to have some exposure to him.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. Looks like we just got another piece of breaking news. Mo Bamba ruled out for the Magic. Robin Lopez going to start in there. Any interest in Rolo? Does that just increase your love of Wendell Carter here? What are we doing with that? And at least it's position relevant for what we're talking about.
Honestly, Wendell Carter was somebody that I was kind of out on today. I thought that this was a spot to potentially sell high on him, but with that news, he becomes again sort of like the default chalk play of the day. He caught 35-40% ownership in certain contests yesterday. Wouldn't shock me if he's higher than that today. He's 5,800 on both sites. Robin Lopez is not going to keep Wendell Carter Jr. off the floor the same way that Mo Bamba does. So I think you can pretty comfortably pencil him in for a few extra minutes. We know that Carter is really strong on a per minute basis. He's 1.13 DraftKings points per minute this year. So I think Carter, he kind of goes from being bad chalk, in my opinion, to now he's back to sort of squarely in the good chalk category.
Yeah, that just turns him immediately into a foundational piece. I was getting some shares, but I had kind of that same feeling like, all right, this might be the time to punch the eject button after we got the nice game. But yeah, I think we're going to be right back on that bandwagon again today. Talk to me about, let's look at some of the guys who are center only. And I know it's probably going to get a little bit wonky as we go from site to site, but let's see if we can pull it off. Any guys who are center only that really stand out where, hey, that's the only spot I'm going to be able to put them, that are the util on the DK slate, of course.
Yeah, on FanDuel, it's interesting because you have two guys that I think from a pricing perspective look really appealing. And that is Nikola Vucevic, who's down at 7,700, and Joval at 7,500. But they're both in just brutal spots, right? Vucevic is taking on the Heat, which means a matchup versus Bam, which is as tough as it gets. And then on the other side, you've got a matchup with Gobert. So, from a price perspective, they're plays that I'm going to have them. And I don't think it's going to take much to be over the field on either of those players. Right now we have Vucevic projected for 4% ownership on FanDuel at a price tag that we would have thought was crazy earlier this season. So I think that those are two players that I'm sort of building in that I want to be overweight on, and that I don't think it will be hard to be overweight on.
Yeah, Joval was the guy who stood out to me a little bit in terms of the optimal rate, particularly on the FanDuel slate. A lot less optimal on the DK slate, but you get him positively leveraged over there, which is somewhat interesting. And we've just seen Brandon Ingram struggle a lot since he's come back. So I think that's leaving a little bit on the table for Joval to do. We were kind of, targeting Joval a lot with Ingram out earlier in the season, and he paid us off a few times. But I think we can continue going back there. So he was definitely a play that stood out for me. Within that Pelicans lineup, is there any, just to switch to a team-oriented space, is there anybody else who jumps out at you on the Pellies here, or is it just a spot where playing against Utah, you just kind of want to go away from blowout narrative and all of that?
I do think you can look at Brandon Ingram as a buy low guy. He's 7,600 on FanDuel. He's given us at least 36 in his past two games. He's coming off 37 and a half minutes in his last game, which was a win in Utah, by the way. So if you think that the Pelicans can keep this game close, I think that there are a few guys on this team that are underpriced. I've stand hard for Josh Hart on this show in the past, and he's given us some really good games recently. He's also given us a couple of clunkers, but I do think, again, Hart, Devontae Graham, even if you think that the Pelicans can keep this game close, they're priced incorrectly on FanDuel. So maybe this is a game that you stack, or you just play the narrative that it's going to be a competitive contest, take some of the ownership discounts and salary discounts. But I think the Pelicans are an interesting team.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting when you say, you can go to that if this is, the narrative that you're telling. It does sometimes pay to just kind of take some of your lineup shares and start telling specific stories about some of these games and the direction that they're going to go. So if you expect that to stay close, you're buying a lot of values there, and those values pay for other things in your lineup. So you're upgrading in different ways than most of the slate. So it makes you another level of contrarian on top of that. A guy that we didn't really talk through when we talked through the Knicks, Mitch Robinson, center eligible only on both sites, 5,300 on the FanDuel slate, 41 on DK kind of pops a little bit just in terms of, Mitch, we've seen him produce at a pretty solid point per minute rate. So any love for Mitch Robinson here with a 25-ish minute projection?
Yeah, his points per minute is down this year. He's at 0.85 on DraftKings. That's not an awful number, especially considering the price tag, but he's kind of like the big man version of Quickley, right? We just haven't seen Tibbs give him the consistent run this year. So, now granted, last game was his first game back from an injury, but just 21 minutes. I think you can have some of him, but he is not a player that I would want to be drastically overweight on.
Makes sense. And that's kind of how he was coming up in crunches. I don't know how many, crunches everybody in the chat that was just talking about Mitch a couple minutes ago were running, but he just wasn't coming up a ton for me, at least on the FanDuel side. I expect I would get to some of them on the DK slate at that price, but it wasn't an aggressive play. So I was curious. That's why I was curious. And it's one where Mitch could definitely come out into onto the court and bend the slate though, with, 5 blocks in the first 10, 15 minutes of the game. And then you're saying, oh boy, I should have had him. But that's a tricky one, I think. Anybody else standing out for you at either the power forward or the center or the combined spots before we wind down here and start talking some prize picks?
Yeah, we didn't mention Sengun, talk about a per minute guy. He's been excellent on a per minute basis. He's at 1.15. And, you think he could see a slight boost in playing time given their injury situation. So he's somebody I'm overweight on. I always have some Montrezl Harrell exposure. You never know when the big Harrell game is going to come. I think he's pretty fairly priced. He's showing up very positively leveraged in our models as well. So, I think that, center is a spot where you can either eat the chalk with Carter. And if you don't do that, you're going to have kind of a contrarian build. Because I do think, when we get these ownership refreshes, Carter is going to, again, go back into that 40+% range. So I think there are some interesting directions you can go.
Yeah, for sure. I've just hit the reload on the page here, so we'll see where he lands. I'm on my dad's internet, so it takes another extra minute or two for this thing to load.
Dad.
He just upgraded to something that I upgraded from a couple months ago. So, hey, what are you going to do? Looks like he jumped Wendell Carter in the most current update for DK, sitting at 42.7% ownership. Looks like the optimal hasn't, the full sim hasn't run yet. FanDuel, Wendell Carter, the 35.9% ownership projection. I'm expecting him to go a little bit north of those numbers.
I'll take the over on that.
Yeah, I think so. And it might not have caught in the last update. You mentioned Sengun. Any concern for him in terms of Garrison Matthews maybe being the guy that they look to soak up some of those minutes? It looks like we've got him projected for only 16.9, still relevant at that number for his price and the point per minute upside. Are you concerned at all about a lack of minutes there? Does that make you sweat at all? And do you worry about Garrison Matthews? I think they last show they were saying that he was the first guy in the second half of the last game that came on.
I mean, for sure you have to sweat the minutes with Sengun. That's why he's so cheap. If he was a 1.15 fantasy point per minute guy and he was playing 30 minutes, we'd be talking about an 80% owned play on this slate. Yeah, so sure. He's a low minute type of guy. There's going to be volatility in players like that, but there's also plenty of upside. On a night where he sees 21, 23, 24 minutes, he's going to have higher upside than a guy that we routinely project for that many minutes in the same price range.
Yep, that's perfect way to look at it. Let's look to chat real quick to round us off here in the last 2 minutes, 90 seconds or so. And everybody make sure to stick around. We're going to be here another half hour talking through some prize picks, talking through what's going on in the slate, some late swapping options. A 2v2, Ayton and Quickley or Mitchell and Rudy Gay?
Ayton, Gay, or Mitchell Quickley? I would take...
Other way around. Ayton Quickley, Mitchell, Rudy Gay.
Okay, I would take number one then.
Yeah, I think that would be the case for me as well. You get the value in Quickley that we talked about. Let's see. Any love for Robin Lopez jumping into that starting lineup in Orlando, or is that just kind of a write-off for you?
Yeah, I'll pass on Rolo.
Same here.
Do we get points for fighting mascots at any sites yet, or?
I always enjoyed that bit when he was on the Knicks for a brief time. That was always fun. Seems like a nice glue guy, chemistry guy, but yeah, for DFS point scoring, not exactly where we're looking. Let's see. Charles Kelly asks, FanDuel GPP, do you go Carter Kuzma or Randle Jalen McDaniels?
Carter Kuzma, Randle Jalen McDaniels. I like Kuzma and Carter. I think Kuzma is somebody we should have given a little bit of love on this show. He's kind of played well in games without Dinwiddie. So I would say that one, but again, that's going to be the chalkier side.
All right. I'll go with you on that one. Kuzma, guy that I don't love getting into and rostering all that much. Just seems like he's burnt me every time I've ever played him, but certainly has seen an uptick in production this season. So yeah, I guess reluctantly I'll agree with that one. That brings us right up to lock, you guys. But like I said, we're going to stick around. We're going to talk some prize picks. So everybody hit that like, hit the thumbs up there for us. Working hard for you. We're up at 6:01. I like that. We picked up a little bit from the last show, but I don't know. Do you guys like the guys on the last show that much better than us, or are we just we got only all the friendly people already answered? I don't know.
I mean, I don't blame you if you do. It's just
yeah, no. Hey, I like those guys better than I like me. At least I like you equal to those guys. But yeah, compared to me, please, those guys blow me away. So let's jump in. We'll pull up the old board here for prize picks. And guys, if you haven't been playing here, we talked about it earlier in the show. It's just a fun, interesting way to go about this. It's different from your typical DFS sites. You're picking props, and what you're doing is booking a 5 entry card. And if those five picks hit for you, you can go 10x on your entry fee. That's pretty solid. And the best way to go about it is just jump to our NBA betting tool, our NBA player props tool, or you can do the same thing over on Odds Shopper, our sister site. and sort by the expected win rate for these different props. And look where Alex has them projected. We give you side by side the line, Alex's projection, and what in our simulations of the slate that's coming up as a win percentage. So we'll take a look through some of these. An interesting one that jumps off the top to me, I just landed on the points total board, and I'll pull up Prize Picks so we can see what their actual line is. But the line we have for points for Donovan Mitchell is at 25.5. Would you go over or under a 25.5 real life point projection for Donovan Mitchell?
My initial gut lean is under on that, with the team sort of at full strength. Like if Conley was out, you could have made a case for him to get a bump there. But even though Mitchell has had pretty solid usage for most of the year, the numbers have been fluctuating. So considering the blowout potential here, I think the under is where I would.
All right, I like it. And it looks like that is that you landed on an agreement with the boss. Alex has that one going under 78% of the time. That seems like a pretty solid choice for Prize Picks. I'm not sure if it's on the board yet. I haven't gotten there. Just landed on the Prize Picks page here. So we can talk through some of these. We get a little time. This was another thing that I like on Prize Picks. That Phoenix and Brooklyn game, one of the first off the top here, hasn't actually locked on their site. They're giving us another 7 minutes to work some of those plays in. So let's take a look at that real quick. Kevin Durant, 26.5 points on the Prize Picks board here. I'll find him on our board on the site. What do you think of 26.5 real points for KD?
I would say off the top that's probably on the low side. Durant has not been as efficient scoring the ball as we have become accustomed to with him, right? He's at like 50%, 42.1. He's got a 31.6% shooting game over his last 4. Those numbers would be average for a normal NBA player, but for Kevin Durant, those are subpar. And what you really have to like about KD is that the minutes are going to be there. He's logged at least 37 in 3 straight games. I'm sure the Nets would like to take it a little bit easier on him, but they just don't have that luxury right now because they're not that good. So I would take Kevin Durant over on that number.
Yep, and it is over and over on our board. It was more down toward a coin flippy kind of a play, so maybe not your extreme go-to if you're booking selections for Prize Picks here. But I thought that was at least an interesting one with that game locking and having been locked already on the other sites. Still able to jump in and play on that one. Another one that kind of falls into that vein. What about a 5 assist line for Julius Randle from the New York Knicks? We talked about his passing acumen and the total lack of point guards that they've got tonight. Where are you finding Julius Randle on the assist board?
Oh, that seems pretty juicy to me. He's a nightly triple-double type threat. You factor in the team missing their top 2 point guards. We talked about how we thought he was going to be a guy who could serve more as a de facto type point guard on this slate. I think that over 5 seems very plausible to me. I will pull up the on-off data just to confirm that he sees a nice boost with no Kemba, no D Rose, but I think that number makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And the boss agrees. He had it in the 70s as far as the expected win rate. So that is a pretty strong one, pretty aggressive one. And like we talked about during the show earlier, 24.7% assist percentage for a power forward center type player. That's just extreme. That is significant. So I would be almost willing to book that on not necessarily under normal circumstances, but pretty close, So I expect that one to fly over in this situation tonight.
Yeah. And as expected, sizable boost, right? He leads the team in assist rate with those 2 guys off the court, 34.8%.
Jeez. Yeah, that is definitely targetable. Let's look around, see what else we've got on the board here. Let's jump to one of the later games, maybe. Let's see, flying around. Well, talk to me about LaMelo Ball. It looks like starting up in 33 minutes. In the real life points line, Prize Picks has LaMelo at a 19.5 line for real life points. We talked about LaMelo quite a bit. We talked about the paciness in that game. What are you looking for there?
I think that's a pretty fair number. The thing that you love about LaMelo is that he doesn't need to score his fantasy points with points, right? He can get you assists, he can get you rebounds, he can even get you defensive statistics. He's right at 19.4 points per game for the year. So I would say slight over when you factor in the matchup and the pace, but I don't think that that's like a slam dunk like the Randle assists.
Yep, and that's exactly where it's landing on our board. Interestingly, we had it as a 20.5 line, and Alex had it going under 55% of the time with a 19.79 real life projection. So if we're making that 19.5, that's just a tidy, efficient kind of line that maybe we just don't go to with so many other extremes on the board. Let's jump back over and we'll sort by the expected win rate here again. And let's look for somebody interesting.
Can I give you one?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
One of the things that I like to use, the player prop market and prize picks for is if there's a guy that's like chalk that I like, but that I'm not getting to a ton of because of projected ownership or things like that, I'll target him in the prop market. So like Kevin Porter Jr. tonight, I said he was a guy that I was not all that interested in just because I thought he had a little bit more bust potential at his salary than some of the other players, that were expected to be popular. He was the guy I was sort of most confident that to fade. So his points prop is set at 14.5. We have a pretty solid overgrade on that in the player prop tool. I think that that's a great way to hedge some of your DFS entries if you wanted to, think about it that way.
I love that plan. That's a great approach to this site and to, it's something we talk about a lot with the DFS specific sites. If you get this guy at a certain price and ownership on one, and then you look to the other two of the major sites, you can maybe shop around and get him at the best price, the lowest ownership there. And that's just another factor, another layer to add to that kind of a concept. And you get away from ownership completely. It's a site where we're not sweating sharks. We're not sweating mass entries. We're just looking for making the most accurate picks with these player props. That's a dynamite look. I really like that. Looking at, we'll jump over and look at some of the ownership because we do have those slates locked. Looks like we're getting Quickley that we talked about on the FanDuel big tournament anyway, 40% owned. Pretty aggressive, but right in line with where we had him projected. We had him at 39.3. He's at 40.1. Pretty solid and accurate projection there. Is that something we talked about Burks getting the start there, and it didn't really seem like we were sweating. If you were aggressively over that Quickley share, would you be nervous at all, or were you comfortable with where that came in?
I think I'm pretty comfortable with that. And on DraftKings, I'm definitely comfortable with that because Burks checked in the fadeaway, which is the largest GPP with the smallest buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
He's at 34.5% ownership. Quickley's at less than 25. So I think Quickley is clearly, like I said, he's the guy that I prefer out of the two, and we're getting him at a better price tag and lower ownership. So I think people may have overreacted to the news that Burks was starting. I would actually feel pretty good if I was a Quickley owner right now.
Not bad. Yeah, that's especially on that DK slate. That is some aggressive Burks ownership. My gosh. A guy that we talked about a little bit on the FanDuel slate coming up a little under where we had him projected in terms of ownership, which I'm kind of excited about because I was not totally thrilled about the play with Michael Bridges. We talked about him, maybe coming in, hitting us around that median projection. Since he went a little bit under, I'm a little bit happier about it. Even if he comes in around that median, that gives me a little bit more leeway there, I think. Where's he coming up on the other side of town?
Less than 4%. So okay. Yeah, not much ownership for Bridges. And one thing that I saw that I am very excited about, and again, I'm sure this is a little bit different on FanDuel because this price tag was much better on FanDuel, but Julius Randle sub 5%. Give me all of that.
About triple that on the old blue site here, but still, I'm actually okay with that. We had him pegged at 13%, but if you're getting that kind of guy at under 20-ish%, we had him coming up 21.8% optimal over there. We've talked about all the benefits of that. So I'm pretty happy to be at that point at a 17% ownership with everything he can give us. So let's jump back over. Anything jumping out to you from the I don't think any of the games have actually started out yet. We'll get to some fantasy scoring, some early sweats here in the next couple of minutes. But anything standing out to you? Any breaking news that's come out in the last few minutes that have really caught your eye here? I'm not seeing anything critical.
Yeah, it doesn't look like anything. Tyler Hero active, but not guaranteed to play is the update that I saw. So that is interesting. If you're, somebody that likes to take stabs on guys at low ownership, here's Tyler Hero at less than 1%, if you're feeling froggy. But I think that's kind of like the worst case scenario, right? Because you can't give anybody the bump that you're expecting Hero to be out, but you also can't play Hero. So that's about the toughest update we've had as far as how this situation could have went.
Yeah, that is the worst update in DFS to get the he's gonna be there, but from the coach.
He'll put the uniform on, he'll be on the bench. We'll see what happens.
Right. Yeah, just make a decision. Come on. Jumping back over to our sponsor, our great pals Prize Picks. I'm looking at a guy that you talked about a little bit. I think you're maybe a little bit higher on him than I was tonight. Darius Garland on the assist board. He's at a 7 assist line. Looks like Alex had him as a 7.5 when we did the board. So it came down on Prize Picks by a half an assist. What do you think of Darius Garland at 7 assists?
I think I would be more interested in taking an over on his scoring prop, which I'll be honest, I don't know what it is on Prize Picks, but the reason I liked Garland so much was the usage bump that we've seen. He's been up over 31% now in 4 straight games. And he has had some big assist games too, right? He had an 11 game, but he's sharing the court with Ricky Rubio. Ricky Rubio is going to be the distributor. Garland is going to be the guy who scores the ball more. So I would be more inclined to take the over on his scoring prop than his assist prop.
And Alex's board agrees that he has him at a 7.06. So Alex has him as basically a coin flip. It was a 60% to go under the 7.5. So that's a pretty critical half an assist there for Garland. Tidy, efficient line when it's at 7. If we jump over to Garland on the points board, it looks like, again, a little bit of a difference of opinion in the line. Our board had him at a 18.5 line, and it looks like Prize Picks, you're getting him at 17.5. So you're getting a little bit of a bonus there. Do you like that one? Do you like him to go over that 17.5 real life points?
Yes, very much so. Again, you probably have to give him a slight usage decrease with Mobley back in, but he's had at least 19 in 4 straight games. He's been at 24 or more in 3 of them, and he hasn't even shot the ball well. Right? He's shooting less than 40% in those 4 games. So he has plenty of wiggle room moving forward to score even more points. So we haven't projected. Alex has him at 19.4. I think that's an excellent number.
Yeah, absolutely. It was coming in 56% win rate at the 18.5 point mark. So take a full point off of that, and you're vaulting that, I'm sure, well into the 60% range. So that would be one of the more likely plays on the board here. Let's see, casting around for some other potential ones to talk about.
I think you can hit some of these Wendell Carter Jr. overs if you wanted to explore some of those.
Which ones are standing out to you?
His points prop is 11.5. That's a pretty reasonable number. He hit, I want to say it was 26 or 27 points yesterday. So I'm sure that line has probably moved up a point or two on some of the sports books with the news that Bamba's not going to play. I think 11.5 is a pretty reasonable number.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another great thing about playing on Prize Picks is you can get these inefficient lines. Once the news changes, you can jump on a play like that. So that is currently sitting on our board at a 12.5. So it's jumped by a point. Alex has him projected at 13.32. And I don't think this was updated for that news either. So we had it as a 57% toward the over. I think when we get him at another full point haircut, that's another one that's going to jump into the mid to high 60s at least. And I would think even further, given the idea that Alex would probably increase that projection, given the maybe it did catch it. It's updated not too long ago. So who knows, but it's a 65-ish one, I would think. Let's see. As far as the let's jump to the 3-pointers made board. Guy that I brought up at one point, Devin Booker from Phoenix. This game locked.
Yeah,
let's scratch that one off. Let's jump to another guy we talked about from the star caliber board, and we'll actually talk about 2 players from this team because it gets a little interesting. Luka Doncic, 2.5 threes. How do we like that one with 23 minutes before that one locks?
I would probably look to take the under on Doncic's threes. I think the perception of Doncic as a 3-point shooter is better than his actual 3-point shooting creds, right? He's at 31.3% this year from the 3-point line. Now, granted, he makes 2.6 threes per game, but he's just not a guy that I want to bank on to make a lot of 3-pointers, right? If I was going to take an over, I would rather do it with Tim Hardaway, because we know that he's a guy who can get hot. He can get streaky. And even though the Mavs scoring numbers, as we talked about, fall off a cliff without Brunson on the floor, you do feel comfortable at least that Hardaway might see a few extra minutes. So he might have some more shot attempts tonight, even though that doesn't necessarily mean he's guaranteed to make them.
Yeah, as a Knicks fan, I can vouch for that. Might just mean a bunch of clanging off the rim. But you're talking about a guy who, in his current 33.2 minutes, we expect maybe a couple additional minutes, taking 7.5 threes a game, making 2.5 of them already, 33.9% from three for the season. So presumably he's going to come through for that fairly low line. And that was the other guy that I did have in mind when I said we would talk about two guys. He's at a 2 on the Prize Picks board. So he's actually under his season average for what he makes by a half a three. I think that one makes a lot of sense to take a look at the over there in the threes. And let's go to more of an oddball one. We'll go to the free throws made, and we'll take a look at a guy who has kind of had a standout season. DeMar DeRozan, 5.5 free throws made. What do we think of that?
Unlike a lot of the stars, DeMar getting to the line a lot this year. He's averaging 7.6 free throw attempts per game. He's shooting 90% from the free throw line. So he's averaging 6.9 made free throws per game. And you said the number was 5.5. I'd be hard pressed, even in a matchup against the Heat, to take the under when it's that different, you know? And 90% for him is not really like an outlier. He shot 88% from the free throw line last year. He's just a very good free throw shooter. So I would expect him to be right around, 6-7 made free throws in most games.
Yeah, and it's kind of, maybe if we think about the way that those rules change, it's more of some of the, like a Trae Young, like a perimeter type of a guy, where a somewhat bigger bodied guy like DeRozan can still get in the mix and maybe draw some of those fouls. So you are talking about a prop that needs some happenstance. The guys on the other team do need to put him on the line, but if he gets there enough times, he is absolutely going to ice that line. That's a pretty easy one, I think. So that's an interesting one. Anything that you're spotting news-wise? Anything breaking in the first few minutes of the early games here that's worth talking about? Looks like Devin Booker out to a 12-point start on the FanDuel slate. Can't read this. 4 field goals made, 2 threes, and 2 free throws for Devin Booker already. So maybe he's going to get to that three-pointer. And Mikal Bridges, 7.2 FanDuel points already. Julius Randle struggling out of the gate with 5 minutes left in the first quarter, only 1.4, 2 boards and a turnover for Julius. That's a little ugly. Emmanuel Quickley doesn't look like he's gotten in the game yet.
I'm going to become known as the kiss of death on this show. Like anytime I talk about a player who takes the floor in that, extra half-hour window, they seem to just disappear. The only 2 guys we didn't talk about for the Knicks were Fournier and RJ Barrett. And of course, they've combined for 15 of the 19 Knicks points to start the game. So
Fournier's been kind of enigmatic, I guess, so far this season. They got to, I don't like to talk, fit and narrative and stuff like that, but I do think there is a bit of a fit issue where the Knicks just need to kind of figure out how this team works again. They just had so much good chemistry and the ability to share the ball, and the usage was right for everybody last year. And I don't think,
let's be honest too, the Knicks outkicked their coverage last year.
Oh, for sure. Oh my God, by far. You got what is probably going to go down as the career year of Julius Randle. I think they paid him and said, thank you very much for that excellent year. And he's going to give us nice performances the rest of the way, but I don't know if he pays that off every time. But they were, that defense, they got a bunch of great 3-point shooting, definitely outkicked their coverage, like you say there. That's some concerning, interesting thing for the Knickerbockers coming out of the top here. Looks like we had a $2 super chat from Corey Balmer. Markkanen, Wood, or Butler McDaniels on DK. I forget whether those games have all locked, but what do you think of that, just to get it answered for somebody who sent us $2?
I would say Markkanen Wood. I mean, McDaniels is somebody we haven't really talked about. Maybe we're shortchanging him a little bit, but I think Markkanen and Wood are like 2 really, really good players, whereas in the other one you've got Butler, who's a stud, and then kind of a punt play. So I almost always will go with the 2 guys in that situation, because I think that if both guys, like if you're talking from a ceiling perspective, I think the ceiling is going to be higher when you can have two guys give you 40 plus.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not looking at a great probability of a ceiling game from Jalen McDaniels. He was sitting 2.9% boom on one side, 2.3 optimal on one side, 2.3 on the other, 5.9 boom score on one side. At 3,200 on that DK price at 14.1% boom score probability. Maybe there's a smidge of upside, but it just wasn't a play for me. So yeah, total agreement from me. And certainly somebody that our pal Eric Lindquist was not happy about the hot start from last night. I think I'm thinking of the right McDaniels. That was a confusing situation with Jalen on one side and Jaden on the other, talking about that game. Let's see. Let's go back to the board here on Prize Picks, and we'll take a look at some of these reboundings. Let me find somebody who hasn't started yet. You just mentioned his name, Jimmy Butler, looking at a 6 rebound prop. What do we think of Jimmy Butler grabbing 6 boards tonight?
James Buckets. That number seems fair to me on the surface. He's had 5.9 rebounds per game this season. I would have to imagine that like the absence of Hero definitely doesn't help Butler from a rebounding perspective. If anything, it might hurt him from a rebound perspective if they put somebody who's a little bit of a better rebounder on the court alongside him. I would lean under on that number, but I think again that's a pretty efficient line.
Yeah, I agree on that, and it makes a lot of sense when you talk about the changing makeup of that team tonight. Looks like I jumped over to the points board. That's why I can't see it anymore. Looks like Alex had him at 6.4 with a 54%, so a coin flip probability, but it was a 6.5 line. So maybe gotten a little bit less efficient, but yeah, I think that's going to be trending more toward the coin flip territory. And let's do a few more here while we.
I'll give you one for
go ahead.
rebounds. Give me Nikola Vucevic over 10 boards. This is a guy who has given us 13 and 18 in his last 2 games. He hasn't played more than 28 and a half minutes yet. If you expect those numbers to keep trending in the upward direction, I think he can give us 10. I know it's a tough matchup, but 10 is definitely like just low for Nikola on the surface.
I like that one. It's it's a game we talked about maybe not targeting for DFS purposes in a lot of ways, but maybe this is the spot where we're looking for those lines where to your point from earlier, a game where we weren't necessarily excited on the other sites. Maybe it's a play that people are sleeping on and one that we can look to here. And it looks like the guy I was just going to mention isn't on the Prize Picks board, unfortunately. I thought there was an interesting one with JaVale McGee, 5.5 rebound line. Alex had that one going over by 70 at a 75% win rate. Unfortunately, not on the Prize Picks board. But hey, if you're making a wager out there, maybe that's one you can throw some love at. Any other ones standing out to you from the Prize Picks board? From any of the categories?
I might be looking again if you want to play this Mavericks narrative that their offense isn't going to be very good tonight. I would consider playing the under on some of the the ancillary players for them, right? Like I wouldn't touch the under on Doncic because again, he's Luka Doncic. He's not somebody that I really want to be fading ever. But Porzingis, 19.5 points. Timmy H, 14.5. You've even got Dorian Finney-Smith is up there at 8.5. I think you can build like a positively correlated understack, and you just play the line that their offense is going to struggle without Jalen Brunson, which all the numbers seem to support.
Makes sense. Hey, here's a guy that you mentioned in that same game on the other side, Montrezl Harrell, 13.5 real points. What do we think?
Yeah. The boss likes him over. I got to say that Harrell is not somebody that I would want to tie into my prop bets because the thing that's great about him in DFS is that he's got that really high ceiling, right? But he's also got that low floor. And we don't get any extra points if he scores 28 for us tonight. You know what I'm saying? Like if he hits the over, he hits the over. He's not somebody that I want to tie money to except in the DFS markets.
Yeah, that's one that it kind of surprised me when I pulled it up on our site after seeing that line. And I totally agree. That's exactly how I was thinking of it. But Alex has him 15.6 point projection, more 2+ points out ahead of the line, 66% win rate. I can't argue too much with the Sims. I mean, that one does look like it's coming through, but that would make me nervous to book anything Trez Harrell with, with a prop bet here. So concerning there. We've got, looks like 4 minutes left to cover here in the show. We'll talk about the upcoming schedule for everything football tomorrow. Looks like Devin Booker just jumped up to 15 on the FanDuel site. Julius Randle's clawed his way with 2 assists up to a 4.4 on that site. Still a 0 from Emmanuel Quickley at 39.9% ownership. A little concerning for some of the field there.
Don't get the second quarter, boys. Don't worry.
Yeah, that's it. A couple of those floaters drop, and now we're home. That's no problems there. Let's see if we can find another one to close this out with. Did we talk about Bradley Beal on the Prize Picks slate, or was that on the last one? I forget.
No, that was just on the DFS part of the show.
All right. I know you liked him. What do you think of a 24-point line on Prize Picks?
Oof.
Real points.
24 points. Again, off the top of my head, feels pretty fair. Beal's usage rate does go up to 34.4% with Dinwiddie off the court this season. So that's a plus for him. The problem is that the effective field goal percentage is down to around 52%, right? That's the big problem with Beal, right? We can talk about usage and all that stuff. He just hasn't really made a lot of shots this year. So I'm you know what? Give me the over on Bradley Beal. Let's go. Let's make it a Bradley Beal night.
All right. I like it. Why not? Let's jump on that. Couple extra shots go down for Beal. And it's a guy, look, we know that Bradley Beal can make some shots. A little bit of happenstance, maybe just hasn't worked out for him so far early in the season. I expect that his true shooting percentage is going to rise as the season goes on. And looking at Alex's board, he had him projected. That's a tidy line. Alex has him projected for 23.94 real points. The line is 24. So that's tidy.
Alex, round him up for us. Round him up one time.
So Boss had him going under what was a 25.5 line, though, 59% of the time. So maybe it becomes a little bit, maybe that flips a little bit, becomes more of a coin flip in the other direction, but not one that I'm in love with. But yeah, let's go with Bradley Beal going over that one. Why not? Let's see if anything came up that we got to clean up in the chat. Nah, it doesn't look like. So guys, we appreciate everybody hanging out. Pal, the news god threw us $2. News god, come on. We pay you, buddy. You don't pay us. Come on. Or I say we like it's coming out of my pocket. Alex pays you. So, Matt, this has been a blast. Fun show hanging out. Guys, everybody make sure hit the like, hit the subscribe, but more importantly, come back tomorrow. We've got a football Sunday. We've got a heck of a lot of content coming up starting really early. I'm not sure if anybody's aware, but we start the football day at 8:30 in the morning. I'm glad I'm not on that show. Yeah, I'm usually up all night. That's nap time for me before I have to start crunching lineups after I crank out my groups article overnight and run 50,000 lineups through Cruncher. But we've got 8:30 to 9, the Awesemo betting show with McCarthy and Ben, 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock. We've got Josh and Adam with the NFL First Look, 10 to 11:45, NFL Deeper Dive, Lofty, Ben, and Alex. 11:45 right up to lock at 1 o'clock. We've got Eric, Matt Savoca, Matt Kajeski coming to you with Live Before Lock. We've got the Fantasy Football Show on the Fantasy Football Channel for season-long people running at the same time with Eitan, Lipri, and Max somebody. We've got NBA Live Before Lock coming up at 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock tomorrow. We think that's when it's going to be with Eric. It looks like you coming back for that one. Then 7:15 to 8:15, me, Emac, and Nick are going to be here talking you through NFL Sunday Showdown. Lot of content tomorrow, guys. We'll see you around. We really appreciate it. Good luck tonight.
Titans +7.
Ooh, love it.